What if Elsa's mysterious powers were hiding a secret that could change Arendelle forever? In Frozen 2, an ancient voice leads Elsa and Anna on a dangerous journey filled with shocking discoveries and hidden truths. Stay till the end as Cinema Craze reveals amazing facts and a complete review of Frozen 2. Frozen 2 is a 2019 American animated musical fantasy movie made by Walt Disney Animation Studios. It is the second movie in the Frozen series and continues the story that began with the first Frozen film released in 2013. The movie was directed by Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee, while Jennifer Lee also wrote the screenplay. The story was created by Jennifer Lee along with Mark Smith, Kristen Anderson-Lopez and Robert Lopez. The film features the voices of Kristen Bell, Idina Menzel, Josh Gad and Jonathan Groff. The story takes place 3 years after the events of the first movie and follows sisters Anna and Elsa, along with their friends Kristoff, Sven and Olaf. Together, they go on an exciting journey into a magical and mysterious forest to discover the true source of Elsa's special powers. The decision to make Frozen 2 was officially approved in March 2015. Before moving forward, Disney carefully discussed whether a sequel could live up to the success of the original film. The production team used more advanced animation technology than they had used for the first movie, allowing them to create more detailed characters, environments, and visual effects. Many different departments worked closely together to bring the film to life. Kristen Anderson-Lopez and Robert Lopez returned to write the songs, while Kristoff Beck once again composed the musical score. The movie was translated into 46 different languages so audiences around the world could enjoy it. Disney also released a documentary series called Into the Unknown. Making Frozen 2, which showed how the film was created behind the scenes, Frozen 2 had its world premiere in Hollywood, Los Angeles, on November 7, 2019, before being released across the United States on November 22, 2019. The movie received mostly positive reviews from critics, although many felt it was not quite as strong as the original Frozen. Even so, it became a huge success at the box office and earned about $1, $45 billion worldwide. By the end of its theatrical run, it was the third highest grossing movie of 2019, one of the highest grossing films ever made, and the second highest grossing animated movie of all time. It also held the record for the biggest worldwide opening weekend for an animated film for 3 years. Frozen 2 received many awards and nominations, including a nomination for Best Original Song at the 92nd Academy Awards. The story is set to continue with Frozen 3, which is planned for release on November 24, 2027. King Agnar of Arendelle once told his daughters Elsa and Anna about a tragic event from the past. Their grandfather, King Runyard, had made a treaty with the Northuldra tribe, who lived in a magical place called the Enchanted Forest. As part of the agreement, he built a large dam in their land. However, a conflict suddenly broke out between the two groups. During the battle, King Runyard was killed, and the magical spirits of earth, fire, water and air became angry. A thick wall of magical mist surrounded the forest, trapping everyone inside. Agnar managed to escape with the help of a mysterious person who saved his life. 3 years after Elsa became queen, she and Anna are enjoying a peaceful autumn in Arendelle with Olaf, Kristoff and Sven. One night, Elsa begins hearing a strange voice calling her from far away. When she follows the voice, she accidentally awakens the magical spirits, causing dangerous disturbances throughout the kingdom and forcing the people of Arendelle to evacuate. The rock trolls arrive, and their leader, Grand Pabby, tells Elsa and Anna that they must discover the truth about the past in order to restore peace. Following the mysterious voice, Elsa, Anna, Olaf, Kristoff and Sven travel to the enchanted forest. When they arrive, the magical mist opens at Elsa's touch and allows them to enter. Inside the forest, they encounter the air spirit, which appears as a powerful tornado. The tornado traps everyone until Elsa uses her magic to stop it, creating ice sculptures that reveal memories from her father's past. Elsa also meets the fire spirit, a small but energetic magical salamander. Soon, the group discovers that the Northuldra people and a group of Arendelle soldiers have remained trapped in the forest for many years and are still distrustful of each other. Anna and Elsa help both sides make peace after learning that their mother, Queen Iduna, was actually a member of the Northuldra tribe. They also discover that Iduna was the mysterious person who saved Agnar during the battle years ago. The Northuldra tell the sisters about a legendary fifth spirit that connects humans with the magic of nature. While Kristoff and Sven stay behind with the Northuldra people, Elsa, Anna and Olaf continue their journey farther north. Along the way, they find the remains of their parents' ship and discover a map leading to Ahtohallan, a magical river believed to hold all the answers about the past. Elsa believes that she must continue the journey alone. Despite Anna's objections, Elsa sends Anna and Olaf away to keep them safe. Elsa then encounters the Nook, a powerful water spirit in the form of a magical horse. After taming it, she crosses the sea and reaches Ahtohallan. Inside Ahtohallan, Elsa discovers that the mysterious voice calling to her was actually a memory of her mother, Iduna. She also learns that her magical powers were a gift from nature because of her mother's brave and selfless act of saving Agnar. As Elsa explores deeper into Ahtohallan, she uncovers the shocking truth about the dam. It was never meant to help the Northuldra people. Instead, King Runeard had secretly built it to weaken them because he feared and disliked their connection to magic. Elsa also learns that Runeard started the conflict by killing the Northuldra leader before being completely frozen by the dangerous magic of Ahtohallan. Elsa manages to send this information to Anna. Because Elsa freezes, Olaf, whose existence depends on her magic, disappears. After learning the truth, Anna realises that the dam must be destroyed if peace is ever to return and if the forest is to be freed from its curse. She wakes up the giant earth spirits and leads them toward the dam. The massive rock giants throw huge boulders, eventually destroying the dam. This causes a powerful flood to rush toward Arendelle. At the same time, Elsa is freed from the ice and rides the Nook back to the kingdom as fast as she can. Using her magic, she stops the flood and saves Arendelle from destruction. With the dam destroyed, the magical mist finally disappears and the enchanted forest is freed. Elsa reunites with Anna and brings Olaf back to life. Kristoff finally proposes to Anna and she happily accepts. Elsa then realises that she herself is the legendary fifth spirit. She explains that she and Anna together form a bridge between people and the magical spirits of nature. Elsa decides to step down as Queen of Arendelle and gives the throne to Anna. She chooses to live in the enchanted forest as its protector, while continuing to visit Arendelle regularly. With the truth revealed and peace restored, both the kingdom and the forest can finally move forward together. The voice cast of Frozen 2, 2019. A deep dive into the ensemble that brought Arendelle back to life when Frozen 2 arrived in theatres on November 22, 2019. It came armed with one of the most carefully assembled voice casts in recent Disney animation history. Produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios and directed once again by Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee, the film reunited the beloved original ensemble while bringing in a wave of acclaimed new talent to populate the expanded world of Arendelle. The casting choices, a blend of Broadway royalty, Emmy-winning television stars, Emmy-winning televisions and internationally celebrated musicians reflected the filmmaker's ambition to deepen the emotional and narrative scope of the franchise. Each voice actor was matched to a character not merely for name recognition, but for the specific qualities they could bring to roles that were more complex, more mysterious, and more emotionally weighty than those in the first film. Kristen Bell, as Anna Kristen Bell, reprised her role as Princess Anna, the warm-hearted, fiercely optimistic younger sister of Elsa, who serves as the emotional anchor of the entire story. Bell's return to the role was never in question. Her buoyant energy and effortless comedic timing had made Anna one of Disney's most beloved heroines in the original 2013 film. In Frozen 2, Anna's arc takes a dramatically darker turn as she confronts loss, uncertainty, and the terrifying possibility of a future without her sister. Belle brought remarkable emotional range to these scenes, delivering some of the film's most quietly devastating moments alongside its lighter comedic beats. Away from the recording booth, Belle had remained one of the most recognisable faces on television through her long-running role on The Good Place, for which she received a Golden Globe nomination. She also reprised Anna for the video game Kingdom Hearts 3. Her rapport with her co-stars, particularly Idina Menzel, remained as natural and genuine as ever, lending the sisterly bond at the heart of the film an authenticity that grounded the story's more fantastical elements. Idina Menzel as Elsa. If any single casting decision defined the identity of both Frozen films, it was Idina Menzel as Elsa, the Snow Queen. Menzel returned for the sequel, carrying the full weight of cultural expectation. Her rendition of Let It Go in the original film had won both the Academy Award for Best Original Song and a Grammy Award, cementing it as one of the most iconic musical moments in modern cinema. In Frozen 2, she was tasked with something even more challenging, voicing an Elsa who is no longer running away from herself, but actively searching for her true identity and purpose. The film's show-stopping new ballad, Into the Unknown, written once again by Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, required Menzel to conjure a new emotional register: yearning, restless, and quietly courageous. A Tony Award-winning Broadway star whose credits include the original Rent and Wicked, Menzel brought a theatrical depth to the role that few other performers could have matched. Her voice work in the sequel was widely praised as among the most emotionally layered in the film, and her chemistry with the rest of the cast made Elsa's solo journey feel simultaneously triumphant and heartbreaking. Josh Gad as Olaf Josh Gad returned as Olaf, the cheerfully naive snowman who has become one of Disney's most beloved supporting characters. In Frozen 2, Olaf is given a more philosophical dimension, grappling with questions about change, memory, and the nature of existence with an innocence that makes his musings both funny and unexpectedly poignant. Gad's voice work has always been the secret weapon of the Frozen franchise. His natural gift for physical comedy and improvisational warmth translates seamlessly into animation, giving Olaf a spontaneity that feels unscripted. The filmmakers were famously protective of the film's plot details during production, reportedly even keeping Gad from reading the full script, given his well-known reputation for accidentally revealing spoilers, which added an extra layer of genuine surprise to his performance. Gad had continued to build his career significantly between the two films, appearing in Broadway productions and a range of film projects, but his identification with Olaf remained one of the most complete actor-character fusions in the animated film world. Jonathan Groff, as Kristoff Jonathan Groff, returned as Kristoff, the rough-edged but tender-hearted ice harvester who is romantically paired with Anna. Frozen 2 gave Groff an opportunity that the original film had largely denied him, a genuine showpiece moment. Kristoff's subplot in the sequel involves a recurring failed attempt to propose to Anna, culminating in the film's most deliberately campy sequence, a full-blown 1980s power ballad called Lost in the Woods, rendered as a loving parody of the era's music videos. Groff attacked the sequence with gleeful commitment, delivering a vocal performance that was simultaneously earnest and self-aware. A Tony Award-winning stage actor, celebrated for his work on Spring Awakening and as King George III in Hamilton, Groff brought his considerable musical theatre experience to bear on a role that finally gave him musical material worthy of his talents. He also provided the voice of Sven, Kristoff's loyal reindeer, continuing a running joke from the original in which Kristoff ventriloquizes his animal companion, Sterling K. Brown as Lieutenant Matthias. One of the most significant new additions to the cast was Sterling K. Brown as Lieutenant Destin Matthias, a soldier of Arendelle who has been trapped in the enchanted forest for decades, faithfully guarding a perimeter that no longer needs guarding. Brown brought immediate gravitas to the role, his deep, resonant voice conveying both Matthias's military discipline and the quiet tragedy of a man who has spent a lifetime in suspended service. Known for his Emmy Award-winning work on the drama This Is Us and his acclaimed performance in Black Panther, Brown was among the most decorated actors to join the franchise. His casting was announced at Disney's D23 Expo, where filmmakers specifically cited the authority and warmth he brought to dramatic roles as qualities they wanted in Matthias. The character serves as an important bridge between Arendelle's past and present, and Brown's performance gave Matthias a soulfulness that elevated what could have been a relatively functional supporting role into one of the film's most memorable presences. Evan Rachel Wood as Queen Iduna. Rachel Wood joined the cast as Queen Iduna, the late mother of Elsa and Anna, whose mysterious heritage becomes central to the film's plot. Iduna's identity as a member of the Northuldra tribe, the indigenous people of the enchanted forest, is the key to understanding the origin of Elsa's magical powers, making her one of the most narratively significant characters in the story, even though she appears primarily in flashback. Wood brought a quiet, luminous quality to the role, her voice conveying both the warmth of a loving parent and the weight of a deeply kept secret. At the time of casting, Wood had received Emmy and Golden Globe nominations for her portrayal of android Dolores Abernathy in Westworld, a performance that demonstrated her exceptional ability to communicate internal complexity and emotional restraint. Her involvement with Frozen 2 added a layer of prestige to the new ensemble, and her chemistry with Alfred Molina as her on-screen husband lent the parental flashback sequences a tender, bittersweet quality. Alfred Molina as King Agnar Alfred Molina voiced King Agnar, the father of Elsa and Anna and the husband of Iduna. A man haunted by a traumatic encounter in the enchanted forest during his youth, Agnar is a figure defined by both his love for his family and the shadow of a mystery he never fully understood. Molina, a veteran of stage and screen whose extensive career spans from Raiders of the Lost Ark to acclaimed Broadway productions, brought an old-world authority to the character, grounding Agnar's relatively brief appearances with emotional weight. His casting alongside Evan Rachel Wood as his queen was inspired. Their contrasting vocal textures, Molina's rich, seasoned baritone against Wood's clear melodic tone, created an instantly believable parental couple whose love story gives the film much of its deeper emotional resonance. Martha Plimpton as Yelena Martha Plimpton voiced Yelena, the stern but ultimately fair-minded leader of the Northuldra people who has kept her tribe alive inside the enchanted forest for decades. Plimpton is one of the most accomplished character actresses in American theatre and television, a Tony Award winner who has brought fierce intelligence to a remarkable range of roles. As Yelena, she channeled that same intensity into a character whose distrust of outsiders is entirely earned by history, making her eventual opening toward Elsa and Anna feel genuinely hard-won rather than simply convenient for the plot. Yelena functions as the moral centre of the Northuldra community, and Plimpton's performance gave her both commanding authority and a guarded vulnerability beneath the surface. Jason Ritter, as Ryder Jason Ritter, voiced Ryder, a young Northuldra man with an open-hearted, adventurous personality and a particular passion for reindeer. Ritter, son of the late actor John Ritter, and a familiar face from television dramas including Parenthood, brought a natural, unpretentious charm to the character, making Ryder an immediately likeable presence in a cast of more complex figures. His easygoing rapport with Rachel Matthews as Honeymaran gave their scenes together a sibling dynamic that felt warmly authentic, and his enthusiasm for the wide world beyond the forest's borders provided useful moments of levity in a film that often ventures into darker emotional territory. Rachel Matthews as Honeymaran. Rachel Matthews voiced Honeymaran, a spirited young member of the Northuldra tribe who becomes a guide and companion to Elsa during her journey in the enchanted forest. Honeymaran is one of the film's more intriguing new characters, perceptive, courageous, and deeply connected to the natural world around her. Matthews brought an appealing warmth and directness to the role, giving Honeymaran a personality that felt distinct and fully formed rather than merely functional. Her character's connection to Elsa is treated with particular care, and the casting of Matthews, an actress with a talent for natural, grounded performances, ensured that Honeymaran's scenes with Elsa felt genuinely meaningful rather than perfunctory. Jeremy Sisto as King Runiard. Jeremy Sisto voiced King Runiard, the grandfather of Elsa and Anna, and a figure whose dark legacy drives much of the film's central conflict. Best known for his work in 6 Feet Under and Law and Order, Sisto lent the character a controlled, patrician coldness that made Runiard's eventual revelation as the film's true antagonist land with considerable impact. Without voicing a single word of menace, Sisto's measured performance conveyed the quiet authoritarianism of a man who believed his prejudices were principles. Sharan Hinds, as Pabby Irish actor Sharan Hinds, returned to the role of Pabby, the ancient troll elder and grandfather figure to Kristoff, who serves as a source of wisdom and exposition. Hinds, known internationally for roles in There Will Be Blood, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and Game of Thrones, brought a weathered, solemn gravitas to Pabby's limited but important appearances, making the character feel authentically ancient and knowledgeable. Alan Tudyk, as multiple roles Alan Tudyk, who has become something of a Disney animation tradition, providing a voice in virtually every Disney animated film produced since Wreck-It Ralph, returned to lend his talents to multiple roles, including a guard, a Northuldra leader, an Arendellian soldier, and reprising the Duke of Weselton through archival audio. Tudyk's versatility makes him an invaluable ensemble presence, and his ability to shift registers across different character types is a skill the studio has relied on consistently. Aurora, as the voice perhaps the most distinctive casting choice in the entire film, was that of Norwegian singer-songwriter Aurora Aksnes, known professionally simply as Aurora. As the voice, the mysterious, ethereal call that lures Elsa toward the enchanted forest. Rather than simply recruit a trained voice actor, the filmmakers sought a performer whose actual singing voice possessed a quality of otherworldly, haunting beauty. Aurora's music had long been associated with Nordic folklore and atmospheric elemental imagery, making her a perfect conceptual fit for a character who embodies the mystical pull of the unknown. Her contribution to Into the Unknown as the spectral counterpart to Menzel's Elsa became one of the film's most celebrated musical moments. Supporting and younger cast rounding out the ensemble, young actors Hadley Ganaway and Matteo Conforti voiced young Anna and young Elsa, respectively, in the film's emotionally resonant prologue sequences. Santino Fontana, who had originally voiced Hans in the first Frozen, returned through archive sound footage. Maya Wilson reprised Balder the Troll, and Paul Briggs returned as Marshmallow. Stephen J. Anderson voiced the palace steward Kai, while Chris Williams made an uncredited return as Oaken, the lovable shopkeeper from the original. Hallam Aviv Hudson voiced Halima, and Delaney Rose Stein and Jackson Stein voiced the younger versions of Iduna and Agnar respectively in the film's period flashbacks. Together, this expansive ensemble, old voices and new, Broadway veterans and television stars, musicians and character actors, created a world that felt richer, more complex and more emotionally ambitious than its predecessor. The casting of Frozen 2 was not simply about assembling recognisable talent. It was about finding the right voices to carry a story that dared to ask harder questions and explore darker emotional terrain than any Disney princess film had attempted before. Frozen 2, 2019. Production, music, release and reception. A comprehensive account production development and the road to greenlight the development of Frozen 2 was never a foregone conclusion. In the immediate aftermath of the original Frozen's extraordinary success in 2013, a film that earned over $1.27 billion at the worldwide box office, swept 2 Academy Awards and generated a cultural phenomenon anchored by Let It Go. The question of a sequel was freighted with anxiety as much as opportunity. Walt Disney Studios chairman Alan F. Horn stated publicly in April 2014 that a sequel would not be immediately forthcoming, as the studio was prioritising a Broadway musical adaptation of the original film. That same month, Walt Disney Company CEO Bob Iger made clear in a CNBC interview with journalist David Faber that the company was deeply reluctant to force the development of a sequel out of a fear that it could not live up to the first film. Iger described the Frozen franchise as something that is kind of forever for the company, drawing a comparison to The Lion King, and signalled that the bar for a sequel would need to be extremely high before the company committed. Behind closed doors, however, the conversation among the original creative team was already shifting. Producer Peter Del Vecchio had noted on March 31, 2014, barely 4 months after the original's release, that he, director Chris Buck, and director-writer Jennifer Lee had collaborated exceptionally well, and that he envisioned another Frozen-related project in the future. In June 2014, Lee confirmed publicly that Walt Disney Studios' Chief Creative Officer John Lasseter had authorised her and Buck to begin exploring the possibility of a sequel. This exploration was simultaneously creative and personal. While working on the short film Frozen Fever 2015, both directors found that they genuinely missed the world of Arendelle and its characters. The fans felt the same way. Del Vecchio reported that he was regularly being asked by audiences about the future of the franchise. The creative team's early conversations about a sequel were anchored by a single crucial narrative question: what would be genuinely satisfying for Anna and Elsa at the end of a follow-up story? Buck later recalled that resolving this question was the very first thing they addressed. Their answer came quickly. Anna would ultimately become the Queen of Arendelle, while Elsa would find freedom outside the kingdom. With that thematic destination established, the rest of the story's architecture could be built around it. The film was officially greenlit when Iger, Lasseter and actor Josh Gad announced at Disney's annual shareholders meeting in San Francisco on March 12, 2015, that Frozen 2 was in full development. Buck and Lee would return as directors, and Del Vecchio would return as producer. The announcement was greeted with enthusiasm by shareholders and the press alike. Though the creative team understood privately that the pressure to justify the sequel's existence would be immense and unrelenting, pre-production, research, writing, and world building with the green light secured, the production team embarked on an extensive phase of research and world building that would underpin everything that followed. The team travelled to Norway, Finland and Iceland, immersing themselves in Scandinavian landscapes, mythology, folklore and culture. These research trips were essential to the aesthetic and thematic identity of the sequel. The autumnal palette of the enchanted forest, russets, golds, deep greens, emerged directly from what the team observed in the Nordic autumn. The mythological creatures that would populate the story, from the Nookwater spirit to the Jotun earth giants, were drawn from genuine Scandinavian folklore given cinematic form. A central creative decision made during pre-production concerned the characterisation of the two lead sisters. The team decided to frame Elsa as a mythic hero, a figure whose extraordinary magical powers set her apart from the ordinary world and drive her toward a destiny she cannot escape, while Anna would remain a fairy tale hero, a deeply human character who inhabits a world of magic without possessing any herself. The first film had successfully blended these two archetypes, and the sequel would build more explicitly on that distinction, and they each back from the 1980s, giving each character a more differentiated arc that reflected her essential nature. The writing of the screenplay was a collaborative process that involved the directors, the producer, songwriter Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez. The story credit reflects this collaborative genesis. It was developed by Lee, Buck, Mark Smith, Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez together. Lee was ultimately credited as the film's primary screenwriter, with Alison Schroeder, hired in August 2018. After Lee had assumed the role of Disney Animation's chief creative officer following Lasseter's departure, receiving credit for additional screenplay material. The collaboration between the songwriters and the storytellers was unusually deep because the songs in Frozen 2 carry significant narrative weight, with each number advancing character development or plot. Anderson Lopez and Lopez were integrated into the storytelling process from the beginning rather than being brought in after the screenplay was complete. A particularly delicate element of the pre-production process was the development of the Northuldra tribe, the indigenous people of the enchanted forest, who are modelled with explicit creative intention on the Sami people of Scandinavia. The production team recognised from the outset that depicting a real indigenous culture required consultation and care that went well beyond ordinary research. Disney entered into a formal arrangement with the transnational Sami Council and the Sami parliaments of Finland, Norway and Sweden, resulting in an advisory group called Vedette. This group worked directly with the filmmakers throughout production to ensure that the Northuldra were depicted with authenticity and respect. The collaboration shaped everything from the characters' costumes and cultural practices to broader thematic elements of the story related to colonialism, displacement and reconciliation. The film's overall production budget was approximately $150 million, a significant investment that reflected both the scale of the production's technical ambitions and the commercial expectations Disney had for the sequel. Filming and animation voice recording for Frozen 2 began in September 2017, though Idina Menzel started a couple of weeks after the other cast members due to a concert tour commitment. The formal announcement of Josh Gad's return as Olaf came that same month, with Gad appearing alongside Buck, Lee, Del Vecchio and Lasseter. In July 2018, Variety reported that Evan Rachel Wood and Sterling K. Brown were in negotiations to join the cast. Their roles were later confirmed as Queen Iduna, Elsa and Anna's mother, and Lieutenant Destin Matthias, respectively. The decision to cast Wood as Iduna was partly driven by the fact that her voice was felt to be vocally compatible with those of Menzel and Bell, lending authenticity to the idea that Iduna was the mother of the characters both actors voiced. The role of King Agnar, Elsa and Anna's father, underwent a cast change during this period. Maurice LaMarche, who had voiced the character in an earlier iteration of the film, was replaced by Alfred Molina for the ethereal, mysterious voice that calls to Elsa throughout the film. The production made an inspired choice. The four-note musical motif that constitutes the voice was derived from the Latin musical sequence known as the Dies Irae, traditionally associated with themes of death and judgment, and was delivered in a manner resembling the ancient Scandinavian musical form called kulning, a high-pitched herding call developed by Sami women to communicate across great distances. Norwegian singer-songwriter Aurora, whose distinctive, otherworldly vocal style had already made her a celebrated figure in the international indie music world, was cast to embody this calling voice. Her performance brought a quality that could not easily be replicated by a more conventional casting choice. Animation and technological innovation. The animation of Frozen 2 represented one of the most technically ambitious productions in Walt Disney Animation Studios history. Approximately 800 people were involved in the overall production, 80 of them animators. Tony Smead and Becky Bressie served as the film's co-heads of animation. Hyun Min Lee took over from Bressie as supervising animator for Anna, while Wayne Unton once again served as supervising animator for Elsa, a role he had held on the first film. Steve Goldberg served as supervising animator for visual effects. Scott Beatty was the director of cinematography layout, and Mohit Kalyampur directed cinematography lighting. The animation team made purposeful use of advancements in technology, artistic performance, and skeletal animation techniques. Before work began on Elsa's sequences, supervising animator Wayne Unton showed his team footage of superhero characters, including Frozone from Pixar's The Incredibles, as examples of the kind of movement they were explicitly trying to avoid. Elsa's physical expressiveness needed to feel graceful, human, and emotionally specific rather than superheroic or performatively powerful. Her movements were ultimately modelled on modern dance traditions, particularly the work of pioneering choreographer Martha Graham, whose emphasis on breath, weight, and emotional interior found its way into Elsa's animated physicality. One recurring technical challenge from the first film, generating a personal flurry effect around Elsa, proved so difficult to render convincingly that the directors made a narrative decision to eliminate it from the sequel entirely, replacing it with the concept that Elsa applies a permafrost coating to Olaf in the sequel to protect him from melting. This kind of creative problem-solving in response to technical limitation was characteristic of the production's approach throughout. In accordance with Disney's broader creative philosophy of differentiating each film stylistically, the entire multi-departmental animation team was instructed to subtly reconstruct the characters' appearance so they were distinct in tone and style from the first film while maintaining clear visual continuity. The difference was intentionally subtle. What the team described as working in very subtle ways with a through line from the first movie to the second. The shift in setting from the wintry kingdom of Arendelle to the autumnal enchanted forest required the development of entirely new technical capabilities. Whereas the primary visual challenge of Frozen had been the rendering of winter snow, the central challenge of Frozen 2 was the consistent and believable depiction of wind passing through an autumn forest. Specifically, how to render that wind cinematically and pass it downstream through the animation pipeline consistently. To create Gale, the wind spirit, the team developed an entirely new tool called Swoop and LAD, which allowed the complex, unpredictable behaviour of wind to be generated and controlled in ways that existing software could not accommodate. For the vegetation of the enchanted forest, the effects team developed two internally built applications, Vegetation Asset and Fire Tree. These tools allowed the team to rapidly populate the forest with autumnal plants and trees, and to give it the fire animation the kind of organic varied quality that generic CGI fire cannot achieve. Lighting and special effects were developed specifically to handle the film's unique visual demands around glacial ice, the depiction of the elemental spirit's magical energy, and the sequences in Ahtohallan Hallen, involving the visualization of memory, a conceptual and technical challenge with no direct precedent in the studio's previous work. Anna's hair, a persistently complex technical element in animated films involving wind, was animated using Quicksilver, a tool originally developed for the wind-heavy sequences in Moana, 2016. For Elsa's hair, the team used the lighting software Beast. The animation of the Nuk, the water spirit, who appears as a horse composed entirely of liquid, required approximately 8 months of dedicated work, with effects supervised by Erin Ramos. The creature's challenge was conveying both the muscular power of a horse and the fluid, transparent, light-playing quality of water simultaneously. The Jotun earth giants, the massive stone creatures that appear in the film's climax, required a long and complex rigging process to ensure that the individual boulders comprising their bodies moved in a way that felt physically plausible and visually interesting without becoming distracting or confusing. The water simulation sequences, particularly Elsa's extended crossing of the Dark Sea on the back of the Nuk, were developed with an explicit ambition of surpassing the already formidable water effects in Moana. The goal was not merely technical competence, but genuine cinematic beauty, with the water's behaviour contributing to the emotional tensions and visual poetry of the sequence. Character and costume design Costume 2 and character design for Frozen 2 underwent multiple rounds of revision before the final designs were approved for production. Designer Griselda Sastra Winata Leme described the design process as the most intricate she had encountered on any animated film. Technological advances in the studio's CGI toolset allowed the creation of more detailed and elaborate outfits than had been possible for the first film, with individual beads, sequins, embroidery threads, and fabric textures all rendered with a specificity that had previously been impossible within production timelines. The team used Marvelous Designer, a CGI clothing simulation program. They date back from the 1980s to drape characters' costume realistically over their three-dimensional form, ensuring that the clothing moved believably with the character's body. Anna's main costume in Frozen 2 was directly inspired by the Norwegian folk bunad, a traditional garment worn during the 1840s and 1850s, typically constructed of wool and decorated with elaborate embroidery patterns specific to different regions of Norway. One significant visual change from the first film was the modification of Anna's hairstyle. The pigtail braids she wore in Frozen were replaced by a single braid across the back of her head, reflecting the fact that she is 3 years older in the sequel and would naturally have developed a different personal style. Elsa's updated appearance was inspired in part by the work of fashion designers Alexander McQueen and Elie Saab. Elie Saab's designs typically feature long trains and floor-length hemlines. The character designers felt this would impede Elsa's movement and undercut her sense of power and agency. Instead, they created a tailored coat with a double-panel cape and epaulettes, a design that referenced high fashion while emphasising Elsa's strength and authority as a figure who moves freely through a dangerous world. The embroidery across the film's characters was rendered using a curve-based mathematical method in which a software program interpreted two-dimensional visual designs as line strokes and rendered them as three-dimensional curves. This approach allowed the design team to make rapid changes during the revision process, minimising the manual work required when a design was modified. It also supported free-form stitching with threads of varying widths, colours and densities, allowing for the full range of embroidery styles that the Northuldra tribe's costumes required. Post-production test screenings and major revisions Frozen 2's first completed scenes were test screened at the Annecy International Animated Film Festival in France in June 2019. At this point, Heads of animation Becky Bressie and effects supervisor Marlon West acknowledged publicly that the film still had 7 weeks of animation and 10 weeks of special effects work remaining, an indication of how close to the deadline the production was running. The film's most consequential test screening took place earlier in San Diego, where the first assembled cut was shown to a test audience. The results were revealing and, for the production team, sobering. While adult viewers responded positively to the film, children, arguably the film's most essential audience, found the narrative difficult to follow. The production team identified 2 primary sources of confusion. The identity of the mysterious voice calling to Elsa was not clear enough, and the dramatic significance of Elsa's physical transformation was insufficiently motivated for younger viewers. Additionally, the film needed more comedy and more screen time for Bruni the Fire Salamander, who had tested strongly with audiences. Acting on this feedback required significant structural changes. A scene in which the lead characters delivered expository dialogue to the people expository dialogue trapped in the enchanted forest, explaining at length who they were and why they had come, was cut and replaced with Olaf's comedic whirlwind recap of the events of the first Frozen. This change served multiple purposes. It gave Josh Gad a standout comedic sequence, it provided younger viewers with helpful narrative context, and it lightened the film's tone at a moment when the story's increasing darkness needed a counterbalance. The post-screening revisions required the animators to create 61 entirely new shots and substantially rework another 35, an enormous undertaking given how little time remained before the film's locked picture deadline. An undisclosed number of shots were also cut from the finished film. Among the casualties of the revision process was an elaborate resurrection sequence for Olaf, a scene that approximately a dozen animators and artists worked on for 2 full months before it was cut from the film entirely. The last major animation scene to be completed before the picture was locked was Show Yourself, the film's climactic musical number in which Elsa enters the mythical Artohallan River and, in a moment of extraordinary self-revelation, learns the truth about the origins of her powers and her identity. According to producer Del Vecchio, this sequence demanded all of the resources at the studio to complete on time. Robert Lopez acknowledged that the first draft of Show Yourself bore little resemblance to its final form. The scene's lyrics and staging only began to coalesce after the production team had settled on the crucial narrative decision that the voice calling to Elsa was the memory of young Queen Iduna. That decision unlocked the emotional and dramatic logic of the entire scene, the documentary series Into the Unknown. Making Frozen 2, directed by Megan Harding, captured the uncertainty and creative tension of this process with remarkable candour. Harding had previously directed a 2014 television special about the making of the original Frozen and approached Disney Animation about documenting the sequel's production. With the studio's cooperation, she commuted from New York City to Burbank, California, and shot 1,300 hours of footage across 115 days between December 2018 and the November 2019 world premiere. This footage was edited down to 6 episodes, each approximately 35 to 45 minutes in length. The series offered an unusually transparent look at the pressures and uncertainties of animated filmmaking at the highest level. Harding's crew was asked to leave the studio only once, when the production team convened privately to determine the identity of the mysterious voice. The documentary was released on Disney Plus on June 26, 2020. The film was edited by Jeff Draheim. Music songs the songwriting partnership of Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, who had written the songs for the original Frozen and created Let It Go, the most culturally pervasive original song in a Disney animated film since A Whole New World, returned to write the songs for Frozen 2. Their involvement in the sequel was not merely supplementary. As noted above, they were embedded in the storytelling process from early development, helping to construct the narrative architecture around which the songs would function. The 7-song soundtrack album was released on November 15th, 2019, 1 week before the film's wide theatrical release. Prior to the album's release, Panic at the Disco had released their own version of the film's central anthem, Into the Unknown, generating additional commercial attention for the song. The album also included a remix of Reindeer Are Better Than People from the original Frozen, providing a point of musical continuity with the first film. The songs of Frozen 2 were conceived with a thematic ambition that Anderson Lopez described as a meta-story, a set of songs that, taken together, trace an emotional and spiritual arc across the full length of the film. The opening ensemble number, Some Things Never Change, establishes the comfortable stasis of life in Arendelle 3 years after the first film, with each character expressing their contentment with the present and their unease about change. It functions as a kind of dramatic irony, a celebration of exactly what the film is about to dismantle. Into the Unknown is the sequel's central anthem, Elsa's equivalent of Let It Go, though the song was deliberately designed not to be a simple reprise of the first film's emotional logic. While Let It Go is a song of liberation and self-assertion, Into the Unknown is a song of resistance giving way to surrender. Elsa's decision to answer the voice is not triumphant in the conventional Disney sense. It is tentative, conflicted, and full of apprehension. Idina Menzel's vocal performance of the song is correspondingly more interior and searching than the theatrical abandon of Let It Go and the duet element, with Aurora providing the haunting, inhuman countermelody of the voice, gives the song a sonic texture unlike anything in the first film. When I Am Older, performed by Josh Gad as Olaf, is the film's comic musical centrepiece, a cheerful waltz in which the snowman reassures himself that all confusing things become clear with age, a sentiment that takes on a melancholic resonance given what the film later reveals about the impermanence of Olaf's existence. Kristoff's Lost in the Woods, performed by Jonathan Groff, was one of the most discussed songs in the film, a deliberate and affectionate pastiche of 1980s power ballads and rock music videos, in which Kristoff laments his romantic frustration with theatrical, self-dramatising excess. The song's visual presentation, with deliberate nods to the aesthetic conventions of late 1980s MTV, gave Groff's underutilised musical talents their most prominent showcase in either film. Show Yourself is the film's emotional and dramatic climax, the moment of Elsa's most complete self-revelation. It is a song of discovery and recognition, structured as a call and response between Elsa and the spirit of her mother. The song builds from tentative inquiry to full-throated celebration, and its staging in Ahtohallan, with the crystalline memory water of the mythical river forming spectacular visual imagery around Elsa, represents the animation team's most technically demanding and visually spectacular sequence. The Next Right Thing, sung by Kristen Bell as Anna in the film's emotional nadir, after she believes both Elsa and Olaf are gone, is arguably the film's most powerful song from a pure songwriting standpoint, a spare, quietly devastating ballad about finding the will to act in the face of complete despair. Stork Kristoff Beck, who had composed the score for the original Frozen, returned to compose for the sequel. Beck's approach to the follow-up was guided by a clear ambition to reflect the emotional and psychological growth that Anna and Elsa had undergone in the 3 years between the two films. He described the score as having matured, introducing more sophisticated musical concepts and thematic elements than the first film's more straightforwardly emotive orchestrations. The score's complexity mirrors the film's greater thematic ambition. It is a more layered, more restless piece of music than its predecessor, reflecting a story in which certainty is harder to come by and resolutions are more qualified. Beck wanted the score to reflect what he described as the film's complex, intense imagery. The elemental spirits, the memory river of Achterhallen, the dark forces of the past that have been shaping the present. The musical language he developed for the sequel incorporated more dissonance and harmonic ambiguity than the first film, appropriate for a story whose central mystery, the origin of Elsa's powers, resists easy explanation until the film's final act. Theatrical release and the marketing campaign for Frozen 2 was one of the largest and most comprehensive in Disney Animation's history. Disney released the film's first trailer on February 13, 2019, 9 months before the film's theatrical release. The trailer was viewed 116.4 million times in its first 24 hours, making it the most watched animated film trailer ever at that point in history, a record it held until the teaser for Inside Out 2 surpassed it in November 2023. The preview poster generated an unexpected moment of public debate when American astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson observed that while water crystals have hexagonal, six-fold symmetry, as correctly depicted in the first Frozen, the preview poster depicted a four-sided snowflake. Director Jennifer Lee responded publicly, explaining that the shape was not intended as a snowflake at all. Its 4 points represented the 4 elemental spirits of the enchanted forest, and its centre represented Elsa as the 5th spirit. The clarification generated considerable press attention and served to deepen public engagement with the film's mythology well before its release. Disney partnered with 140 brands worldwide to promote Frozen 2, the highest number of brand partnerships for any Disney animated film in history. In the United States, the studio worked with partners including Enterprise Rent-A-Car, McDonald's and Lego. The lead voice cast, Menzel, Bell, Groff and Gad undertook an extensive promotional schedule in November 2019 that was so demanding Bell publicly noted that time was not there. Their appearances included a Friendsgiving special event broadcast on ABC, appearances on the popular competitive singing programme The Masked Singer, and a Women of Impact programme on Nat Geo Wild. The 103-minute film premiered on November 7th, 2019 at the Dolby Theatre in Hollywood, Los Angeles, 14 days before its general theatrical release. The film had initially been scheduled to open on November 27th, 2019, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, but was moved forward 5 days to November 22nd, 2019, placing it in the week before Thanksgiving rather than on the holiday itself. This decision proved commercially savvy as it gave the film an additional opportunity to build before the holiday weekend brought families to theatres in larger numbers. The film was localised by Disney Character Voices International into 45 languages by its original theatrical release date, up from the 41 languages into which the original Frozen had been translated. Among the localised versions released was Jiknon 2, a Northern Sami language edition, released specifically to honour the contribution of the Sami people to the film's cultural and narrative substance. A sing-along version of Frozen 2, with on-screen lyrics displayed during the musical numbers, was released theatrically on January 17, 2020, offering audiences a communal participatory experience in the tradition of the highly successful sing-along releases that had accompanied the first film. Home Media Walt Disney Studios Home Entertainment released Frozen 2 for digital download on February 11, 2020, and on Blu-ray and DVD on February 25, 2020, approximately 3 months after its theatrical debut. Simultaneously with the standard Blu-ray and DVD release, the studio released a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray edition, an Ultimate Collector's Edition, and a 4K UHD Blu-ray Steelbook Edition aimed at collectors. The home media release was notably generous in its supplementary content. Special features included a sing-along audio recording of the film, an extended presentation of the Nordic mythology underlying the enchanted forest design and history, musical clips, deleted music, and deleted scenes. The release also included 29 translated versions of Into the Unknown, a deliberate echo of the multi-language Let It Go album that had been released following the original film's theatrical run and had become a cultural artefact in its own right. The film's Disney Plus streaming premiere was originally scheduled for June 26, 2020. However, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and the widespread closure of theatres and entertainment venues globally prompted Disney to accelerate the Disney Plus release dramatically. The film premiered on Disney Plus on March 15, 2020 in the United States and on March 17, 2020 in Canada, the Netherlands, Australia and New Zealand. Disney framed the early digital release as a gesture of goodwill toward families sheltering at home during the pandemic, and the availability of the film on the streaming service drove significant subscriber engagement during the early weeks of the global lockdowns. Reception box office opening weekend and domestic performance Frozen 2 entered theatres as one of the most anticipated animated films in years, and its opening weekend performance confirmed that anticipation in spectacular fashion. In North America, the film debuted to an estimated $130 million over its opening weekend of November 22, 2019, revised from initial Sunday estimates of $127 million. This figure represented the largest opening weekend for any Walt Disney Animation Studios release in history, surpassing the previous record held by Zootopia 2016, which had opened to $75.1 million. It also established a new record as the biggest November opening weekend for any animated film in the domestic market. The domestic opening was particularly impressive given the strategic calendar position Disney had chosen for the film. The original Frozen had opened over Thanksgiving 2013, earning $67 million for its 3-day opening weekend and $93 million over 5 days, a more modest debut that grew through sustained word of mouth into a historic theatrical run. By releasing Frozen 2 in the week before Thanksgiving, Disney gave the sequel a running start that positioned it for continued strong performance through the holiday weekend and into the Christmas season. The film demonstrated excellent audience retention in subsequent weeks. Thanksgiving weekend itself provided a substantial secondary boost as school holiday schedules brought additional family audiences to theatres. The domestic total eventually settled at $477. 4 million, a significant figure that reflected consistent interest throughout the holiday season and into the new year. International and global performance, the international box office performance of Frozen 2 was even more remarkable than the domestic numbers. The film debuted to $228. 2 million from overseas territories in its opening weekend, a record for any animated film in international markets at that time. The worldwide opening weekend total of $358. 2 million was the highest ever recorded for an animated film globally, surpassing the previous record by a dramatic margin and establishing Frozen 2 as the dominant blockbuster release of the late 2019 season. The original Frozen had opened to just $67 million in comparable international markets, meaning the sequel's launch represented a 241% increase in overseas appetite for the franchise. The film performed with particular strength in Asia. China alone contributed $53 million to the opening weekend total and ultimately finished its run there with over $111. 5 million, surpassing the lifetime international haul of the first film in that market alone. South Korea generated $85.4 million over the film's full run, making Frozen 2 the highest grossing animated film of all time in that territory. Japan contributed $67.3 million. The United Kingdom delivered $49.6 million and Germany added $39.9 million. In numerous markets, including Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand and Russia, The film set records as the highest grossing animated opening weekend of all time. Russia's $13. 7 million opening weekend was itself a record for animation in that market by its third weekend of release. Frozen 2 had crossed the $1 billion global threshold, becoming the 60th film of 2019 to achieve that milestone, a feat without precedent in studio history. By the end of its theatrical run, the film had accumulated $976.3 million from international territories and $477.4 million domestically, for a worldwide total of $1.453 billion. This placed it as the third highest grossing film of 2019, behind Avengers, Endgame and The Lion King, the 10th highest grossing film in cinema history at that point, and the second highest grossing animated film of all time, a position that reflected both the enduring global power of the Frozen brand and the film's genuine commercial appeal across demographics and territories. Frozen 2 also held the title of the highest grossing world opening for any animated film for 3 years, until another production eventually surpassed it, CinemaScore, and audience reception, as measured by CinemaScore. The market research firm that surveys moviegoers on opening night returned an A grade for Frozen 2, slightly below the A+ score that the original Frozen had earned. This differential was consistent with a broader pattern of audience response. The film was received enthusiastically, but a noticeable portion of the audience felt it did not quite equal the emotional impact of the first film. The Rotten Tomatoes audience score, based on over 25,000 verified ratings, settled at 92%. A figure that speaks to widespread audience satisfaction, even if critical opinion was somewhat more divided. Critical response, the critical reception of Frozen 2 was broadly positive, though it was accompanied by a consistent refrain across many reviews. The film was visually extraordinary and emotionally ambitious, but fell short of its predecessor in terms of narrative cohesion and the kind of spontaneous, creative magic that had made the original Frozen feel like a genuine surprise. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 77% based on 342 reviews, with a critical consensus that reads, "Frozen 2 can't quite recapture the show-stopping feel of its predecessor, but it remains a dazzling adventure into the unknown." On Metacritic, the film earned a score of 65 out of 100 based on 47 critic reviews, indicating generally favourable but not exceptional reviews from the critical community. The IMDb user rating settled at 6.8 out of 10. The Hollywood Reporter's Todd McCarthy wrote that the film has everything you would expect. Catchy new songs, more time with easy-to-like characters, striking backdrops, cute little jokes, a voyage of discovery plot and female empowerment galore, except the unexpected, adding that Disney had been careful, cautious, conscientious, and committed to continuing the franchise with the utmost fidelity to the original, resulting in a sequel that can't miss with its massive constituency and will make another mint, but at the same time can't help but feel predictable, safe, and beholden to formulaic rules. McCarthy's framing captured a tension that many critics identified. Frozen 2 was clearly accomplished, but its very faithfulness to what had made the first film successful limited its ability to generate the kind of surprise and delight that audiences remembered. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian offered a 3-star review, describing the film as an entertaining revival, though a thaw is beginning to set in, and noting with regret that the film produced no song capable of matching the viral cultural saturation of Let It Go. This comparison with the first film's signature moment was a recurring point in negative or mixed reviews, an impossible standard that the sequel inevitably fell short of. The RogerBert.com review, written by contributor Nell Minow, was considerably more generous. Minow observed that the film had an autumnal palette with russet and gold, setting the stage for an unexpectedly elegiac tone, noting that even Olaf's irreducible cheerfulness carried a new quality of wistfulness in the sequel. She praised the film for its emotional complexity and concluded that it was funny, exciting, sad, romantic and silly in ways that belied the common critical reduction of it to a cash-in sequel. Among the film's most consistent, critical, praiseworthy qualities were its visual splendour and technical achievement. Even reviewers who found the narrative overly complicated or emotionally diffuse acknowledged the animation as exceptional. The autumnal enchanted forest, the water sequences involving the Nook, the climactic Show Yourself number in Atohallan, and the visual design of the elemental spirits were widely cited as among the most beautiful things Disney animation had produced. The voice performances, particularly Menzel's work in the more restrained emotional register required by the sequel, and Gad's comedic timing as Olaf, also drew consistent praise across the critical spectrum. The more critical voices pointed to the film's narrative as its central weakness. Several reviewers argued that the screenplay was simultaneously overcomplicated and underdeveloped, that it introduced too many mythological elements without fully realising any of them, and that the film's ambition to say something meaningful about colonial history, environmental responsibility and personal identity resulted in thematic overload rather than thematic clarity. Some critics felt that the mystery of Elsa's origins, while intriguing in concept, was not satisfyingly resolved at the narrative level, and that the film's endings, multiple in number and somewhat abrupt in execution, did not provide the kind of catharsis the story had been building toward. The film's feminist dimensions drew considerable academic and critical attention. Several analysts praised the sequel's implicit critique of colonialism through the parallel with Sami history, noting that the Northuldra Dam storyline engaged with real Indigenous experiences in a way that the first film's fairy tale fantasy had no occasion to address. Slate critic Inku Kang argued that while the film was clearly influenced by Sami history, the Northuldra could also be interpreted as representing displaced Native Americans, with Arendelle functioning as a kind of idealised analogue for a colonial nation confronting the consequences of its own past. Jennifer Baldwin, writing from a theological perspective, described Frozen 2 as a film concerned with trauma, transformation and the role of communities in environmental repair, themes that resonated beyond the film's immediate narrative context. Sociologist Lauren Dundes offered a more critical feminist reading, arguing that the film's treatment of Elsa ultimately retreated to outdated conceptions of gender roles by containing her power within structures that did not truly challenge masculine authority. Nia Kurniawati offered a contrasting view, arguing that the film's feminist message was subtle and realistic in a way that reflected genuine artistic intention rather than box-ticking. This range of scholarly and critical responses illustrated the degree to which Frozen 2, for all its qualities as popular entertainment, had engaged with genuine questions of representation, history, and identity in ways that invited serious analysis, accolades despite the mixed critical consensus relative to the first film. Frozen 2 accumulated a substantial body of awards recognition. The film received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song for Into the Unknown at the 92nd Academy Awards in 2020, though it ultimately did not win. Notably, the film was not nominated for Best Animated Feature, a category the first Frozen had won, nor did Disney submit it for consideration in that category, a strategic decision that reflected the studio's confidence in the film's commercial performance, even if critical opinion was slightly more guarded. Across the full awards season, Frozen 2 received a total of 72 nominations and won 12 awards from various guilds, critics' associations and industry bodies. The Annie Awards, the animation industry's most prestigious peer recognition, nominated the film in several categories. The Golden Globe for Best Animated Feature Film was also among the nominations the film received. The songs, the animation and the voice performances attracted the majority of the award's attention, consistent with the critical consensus, that the film's technical and creative execution was stronger than its screenplay, the documentary series Into the Unknown. Making Frozen 2 itself became a notable companion piece to the film, offering audiences an unusually transparent and humanising portrait of the creative process. The series was well received by critics and audiences on Disney Plus and served to deepen appreciation for the film's production challenges among viewers who had initially taken the finished product for granted. Frozen 2 stands, in the final accounting, as one of the most commercially successful animated sequels ever produced and one of the most ambitious. A film that asked more of its story and its audience than most animated blockbusters dare to, and that achieved enough of what it attempted to justify the attempt, even if the gap between aspiration and execution remained visible to careful observers. Its place in the history of Disney animation is secure, if slightly complicated. A film of extraordinary visual artistry, genuine emotional ambition and undeniable commercial power, measured always against the impossible standard of the beloved original it was built to follow. Broader thematic and cultural significance, colonialism and indigenous representation. Among the most substantive and widely discussed thematic dimensions of Frozen 2 was its engagement with the history of colonialism and its portrayal of an indigenous people who bore clear and deliberate resemblances to the Sami of Scandinavia. The Northuldra were not incidentally similar to the Sami. The filmmakers made this parallel explicit through their consultation process with the Sami Council and the Sami parliaments of Norway, Sweden and Finland. The Northuldra's reindeer herding culture, their spiritual relationship with the natural world, their distinctive clothing and visual design, and their status as a people who have been confined, constrained and harmed by the actions of a more powerful neighbouring state. All of these elements were consciously drawn from Sami history and experience. The historical parallels embedded in the film's plot are specific and pointed. In the narrative, King Runard of Arendelle builds a dam in the Northuldra homeland, ostensibly as a gift, part of a treaty arrangement, but in reality designed to weaken the tribe by depriving them of resources and diminishing their connection to the magical world around them. Runard's motivation is the one that has driven colonial projects throughout actual history. Fear and contempt for a people whose relationship with the natural and spiritual world he cannot control or comprehend. When he murders the Northuldran leader in cold blood and triggers a war that results in the forest being sealed off from the outside world, he is acting out a historical pattern that has repeated itself across many indigenous cultures and many colonising powers. The real-world Sami context is even more specific than the broad colonial parallel. From 1979 to 1981, a hydroelectric power station was built on the Altelva River in Norway. The Alta controversy, as it came to be known, involved the flooding of a Sami village and the disruption of traditional reindeer herding and salmon fishing practices that had been central to Sami life for centuries. The controversy galvanised Sami political consciousness and is remembered as a watershed moment in the history of Sami rights. The dam in Frozen 2, built to suppress rather than empower, cannot avoid being read against this background, and the film does not attempt to avoid the parallel. Inku Kang's analysis in Slate extended the film's colonial critique beyond the Sami parallel, suggesting that the Northuldra could equally be read as representing displaced Native Americans, with Arendelle serving as a kind of idealised stand-in for a colonial nation. The United States in particular, that is only now beginning to grapple honestly with the violence of its own founding. The argument is that the film's willingness to frame its heroines as the descendants of a colonial oppressor, rather than as innocent inheritors of a kingdom earned by merit, represents a meaningful departure from Disney's traditional approach to its monarchical fantasy settings. The film's resolution of the colonial storyline has been criticised by some analysts as insufficiently radical. Elsa's last-minute intervention prevents the destruction of Arendelle, meaning that the act of justice, the destruction of the dam, does not result in meaningful material consequences for the people who benefited from the injustice. Matt Goldberg noted that the symbolism of the film's ending is undermined by having Elsa save Arendelle rather than facing the deeper question of whether the kingdom itself deserves to be saved. The racial dimensions of the film are also complicated by the revelation that Elsa and Anna are themselves half Northall Dran, a narrative choice that mitigates the moral stakes of the colonial critique by making the heroines not fully members of the colonising culture, even as it underscores the film's interest in heredity and the ways that history shapes the present. Environmental Themes' Jennifer Baldwin's extended analysis of Frozen 2 reads it as a film concerned with environmental trauma and the imperative of ecological repair. In her reading, the dam that Runyard built is not only a symbol of colonial oppression, but also a symbol of environmental destruction. A human intervention in a natural system that damages not only the people dependent on that system, but the spiritual and elemental forces that animate the world itself. The elemental spirits who seal the enchanted forest in mist are responding to an act of ecological as well as political violence. Elsa's journey through the film is in part a journey toward understanding this, toward recognising that her powers, which have always set her apart from ordinary human society, actually connect her to the deeper life of the natural world. Olaf's characterisation in the sequel is particularly rich in this regard. His repeated observation that water has memory introduces the film's central epistemological metaphor, that the past is not gone, that it is preserved in the physical world in forms that can be recovered by those with the sensitivity and courage to look. Atahallan, the mythical river, is quite literally a repository of memory, a place where the past is held in crystallised form and can be accessed by those willing to make the journey. The notion that the natural world contains a kind of moral record, that it remembers what human societies prefer to forget, gives the film a depth of ecological imagination that extends well beyond the requirements of its entertainment-driven narrative. Baldwin's analysis concludes that the film encourages its audience, and particularly its young audience, to adopt more sustainable and accountable practices in relation to the natural world, to make reparations for past environmental damage, and to recognise the interconnectedness of human societies and natural systems. Whether or not the filmmakers consciously intended all of these implications, the thematic architecture of the film supports them. Frozen 2 can be read as a story about a world in which environmental damage and historical injustice are not separate problems but deeply intertwined consequences of the same fundamental failure of respect. Feminist dimensions. The feminist dimensions of Frozen 2 were examined extensively in critical and academic writing in the years following the film's release. The film's female characters, Elsa, Anna, Queen Iduna, and Yelena, occupy the film's most significant narrative positions, and the story is structured around the question of what a woman does with power that she did not choose and a destiny that she did not ask for. Elsa's arc in the sequel complicates the liberation narrative of the first film in instructive ways. Let It Go had presented Elsa's embrace of her powers as an act of pure emancipation, a breaking of the chains of shame and concealment. Frozen 2 asks a harder question. Now that she has accepted and integrated her powers, what are they for? The answer the film proposes, that Elsa is the fifth spirit, a bridge between the human world and the magical natural world. gives her powers a purpose and a context that transforms them from a personal gift into a social and spiritual responsibility. She does not simply get to enjoy her power. She must use it in the service of something larger than herself. Anna's arc is equally thoughtful in feminist terms. Throughout the film, Anna is repeatedly placed in the position of witnessing rather than acting, watching Elsa do extraordinary things while she remains on the sidelines. The film's most powerful correction of this imbalance comes in The Next Right Thing, in which Anna, alone and in despair, must find the will to act without any guidance or reassurance. The song is explicitly about the experience of depression and learned helplessness, the sense that there is no good option, that action is meaningless, that the future is unnavigable. Anna's decision to do the next right thing, to take the smallest possible step toward what she believes is morally necessary, regardless of the consequences, is a quietly radical feminist act in a Disney context, precisely because it does not culminate in triumph, but in mere continuance. Sociologist Lauren Dundes' more critical reading focused on the Nook sequence, the extended scene in which Elsa must tame the waterhorse spirit in order to cross the dark sea. Dundes argued that by framing Elsa's relationship to the Nook as that of a horse whisperer, a figure whose power over the creature is contingent on gentleness, patience, and emotional sensitivity rather than force, the film inadvertently reinforces traditional gender expectations around feminine forms of power, soft, relational, and ultimately unthreatening to established hierarchies. Whether this reading fully accounts for the complexity of the sequence, or whether the film's overall feminist architecture is undermined by a single narrative choice, remains a question on which reasonable critics disagree. Nia Kuniawati's more positive reading emphasised the film's subtle and realistic feminist message, its interest in showing female power as it actually operates in most contexts, through relationship, intuition, and a willingness to act on incomplete information rather than waiting for certainty. Both readings contain insight, and the tension between them reflects the difficulty of the creative challenge the filmmakers faced. How to make a film about powerful women that neither trivialises their power nor constructs an impossible fantasy of invulnerability that no real woman could inhabit. Legacy and franchise. Continuation Frozen 2's position in the Frozen franchise ultimately confirmed what the extraordinary commercial and critical success of the original had suggested. That Disney had created one of the most durable and beloved animated properties in its modern history. The $1.453 billion global gross demonstrated that the audience's appetite for Anna, Elsa, Olaf, and the world of Arendelle had not diminished in the 6 years since the original. If anything, it had deepened, as a generation of children who had grown up with the first film were now old enough to engage with the sequel's more complex emotional and thematic content. The decision by Disney to move forward with a Frozen 3, announced after the sequel's success had confirmed the franchise's long-term viability, represents the studio's recognition that the world of Frozen has a depth and an audience loyalty that justifies continued investment. The creative team's commitment to making each instalment narratively and thematically ambitious, rather than simply delivering variations on the first film's formula, suggests that the franchise's future holds the potential for continued creative growth, even as the commercial stakes grow ever higher. Frozen 2 ultimately stands as a film that took genuinely ambitious risks, thematically, narratively, and technically, and mostly succeeded in justifying them, even if it could not match the incandescent, spontaneous magic that had made the original Frozen one of the most beloved animated films of the modern era. Its visual grandeur, its emotional honesty, its willingness to engage with real history, and its commitment to giving its characters genuine arcs of growth and self-discovery set it apart from the majority of animated sequels which are content to deliver competent variations on their predecessors' formulas without attempting anything more ambitious. Frozen 2 attempted more, and in doing so, earned its complicated but ultimately positive place in the history of animation, the Sami collaboration. A model for Indigenous engagement, the formal partnership between Walt Disney Animation Studios and the Sami people, mediated through the Sami Council and the advisory group Vedette, represented one of the more thoughtful and specific attempts by a major respectfully with an Indigenous culture during the production of a film based on the Drutantin that drew heavily on that culture's history and traditions. The agreement was unprecedented in its structure. Rather than simply consulting individual Sami advisors on an informal basis, Disney entered into a formal relationship with the transnational political body that represents Sami interests across Norway, Sweden and Finland, and committed to ongoing collaboration throughout the production process. The practical impact of this collaboration was visible across many aspects of the finished film. The design of the Northuldra's clothing, their patterns of embroidery, their relationship with reindeer, their spiritual practices, and their political organisation all were shaped by the advisory process in ways that grounded the fictional tribe in genuine cultural specificity. The Northuldra were not simply a generic magical indigenous people of the kind that Disney had sometimes been criticised for in earlier films. They reflected real practices, real aesthetic traditions, and real ways of relating to the natural world that the Sami people had developed over centuries. The name Jiknon, too, given to the Northern Sami language version of the film, was itself a meaningful gesture. In releasing a version dubbed entirely in Northern Sami, a language with a relatively small number of speakers and a complex history of suppression by Scandinavian state governments, Disney acknowledged the Sami people not merely as a source of inspiration, but as a living community with a living language and culture whose preservation deserved active support. The release of this version was described by Disney as an act of honouring the Sami people's contributions to the film, and it was received with considerable appreciation by Sami cultural organisations. The collaboration was not without its complexities and criticisms. Some Sami scholars and cultural commentators noted that the Northuldra, for all their cultural specificity, were ultimately fictional and romanticised, presented as a people of inherent nobility and magical connection to nature, whose suffering serves primarily as a narrative device for the self-discovery of two Arendellian sisters. The noble savage tradition in Western popular culture has a long and problematic history, and even the most culturally informed depiction of an indigenous people is not immune from the broader dynamics of that tradition. The film's happy ending, in which the injustice against the Northuldra is addressed without fundamentally disrupting the power of Arendelle, was for some critics a limitation that the production's good intentions could not fully overcome. These criticisms are worth taking seriously, and the filmmakers themselves would likely acknowledge them as genuine limitations of what any commercially oriented entertainment product can achieve. What the collaboration demonstrated, however, was that a studio willing to invest seriously in genuine cultural consultation could produce a mainstream animated film that engaged with Indigenous history in a way that went meaningfully beyond tokenism or superficial representation. The model that Disney developed for Frozen 2 has influenced subsequent discussions within the industry about the standards that ought to govern the depiction of real cultural groups in animated and live action productions. Production design and visual world building, the visual world of Frozen 2 represented a complete and self-consistent aesthetic departure from the snowbound kingdom of the first film, while maintaining visual continuity with what had come before. Production designer Michael Giaimo, working with a team of artists, designers and illustrators, created the enchanted forest as a space that felt simultaneously ancient and alive, a place shaped by forces older than the human inhabitants who had once lived in it, and by the elemental spirits that had sealed it from the outside world. The decision to set the film in autumn rather than winter was both thematically meaningful and visually liberating. Where Frozen had worked within a colour palette dominated by blues, whites and icy purples, Frozen 2 could draw on the full warmth of autumnal colour, the deep golds, russets, burnt oranges and mossy greens of a northern forest in October. This palette gave the film a visual richness and variety that contrasted productively with the stark minimalism of Arendelle, and it anchored the film's emotional tone in the season most traditionally associated with endings and transitions. The enchanted forest's vegetation was itself a major technical challenge. The team needed to populate an entire forest with a believable range of autumnal plant life and to animate the wind moving through that vegetation in a way that felt organic and consistent. The internally developed vegetation asset tool allowed the rapid placement and variation of thousands of individual plants, trees and grasses, while the fire tree application managed the complex interaction between vegetation and the fire spirit's presence. The result was a forest that felt genuinely inhabited and alive, one in which the boundary between the natural and the magical was intentionally blurred. The design of the elemental spirits, Gale the wind spirit, Bruni the fire salamander, the Nuk water horse and the Jotun earth giants, drew on mythological traditions from Norse, Sami and broader Scandinavian folklore while being reimagined for a contemporary animated context. Gale, invisible except for the leaves and debris she carries with her, required the swoop tool to animate convincingly. Bruni, the tiny fire salamander who forms an unexpected bond with Elsa, became the film's most unexpectedly popular new character, a creature of pure visual delight whose agitated magical fire required the fire tree application to render. The Nuk demanded 8 months of dedicated effects work to achieve the liquid, luminescent quality that makes the creature simultaneously beautiful and threatening. The Jotun, the massive stone giants who serve as the climactic instrument of the dam's destruction, required careful rigging to move with the kind of geological weight and momentum that their scale demanded. The soundtrack's cultural reach, the Frozen 2 soundtrack, achieved remarkable cultural penetration in the months following the film's release, though it did not produce a single moment of viral cultural saturation comparable to Let It Go. Into the Unknown was the song most widely circulated and discussed, both in its Idina Menzel-Karora version from the film and in Panic. At the disco's pop rock cover, which introduced the song to audiences who might not have encountered the Disney version. The song earned the film's Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song and served as the film's primary promotional vehicle throughout the marketing campaign. The Next Right Thing attracted a particularly devoted following among listeners who responded to its emotional honesty about depression and the experience of finding the will to continue in the face of despair. The song was widely shared on social media platforms by people who described it as speaking directly to their own mental health experiences, and it became one of the more unexpectedly resonant pieces of music to emerge from a mainstream animated film in the 2010s. Kristen Bell's understated, emotionally raw vocal performance was central to the song's impact. She sang it with none of the theatrical grandeur of Menzel's big numbers, and that restraint made it more rather than less effective. Lost in the Woods, Kristoff's 1980s rock ballad became a minor phenomenon among audiences who appreciated its knowing, self-aware humour. Jonathan Groff's commitment to the song's exaggerated emotional register, performing it as if it were a genuinely earnest anthem rather than a comedy set piece, made it the film's most quoted and referenced musical moment among older audiences who recognised the deliberate stylistic throwback. The song's music video aesthetic, with its visual quotations from classic MTV programming, rewarded viewers who were old enough to recognise what was being parodied. The decision by Kristoff to create a more harmonically sophisticated and thematically complex score for the sequel was acknowledged in the film music community as a significant achievement. The score's use of leitmotifs, recurring musical themes associated with specific characters, places and emotional states, was more intricate than in the first film, reflecting the greater narrative complexity of the sequel and Beck's ambition to create a musical world that rewarded close and repeated listening. Several music critics who reviewed the soundtrack album independently of the film praised it as a substantial piece of film composition that stood on its own terms rather than merely as accompaniment to the visual experience. The localization of the film's music into 46 languages, including the Northern Sami version, generated its own cultural interest, particularly as video compilations of the various language versions of Into the Unknown began to circulate on YouTube and other platforms. Disney released a version of the film's soundtrack featuring 29 different language versions of Into the Unknown as part of the home media release, creating a document of the film's global reach and the enormous diversity of the voices who had inhabited Elsa across the film's worldwide distribution. Accolades in Detail Frozen 2 accumulated a total of 72 award nominations and 12 wins across the full awards cycle following its November 2019 release. The Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song for Into the Unknown was the film's most prestigious individual recognition, placing it in the company of other major musical films competing for the honour at the 92nd Academy Awards ceremony held in February 2020. The film's failure to receive a Best Animated Feature nomination, contrasting sharply with the original Frozen, which won that category, was a notable absence. Though Disney chose not to submit the film for consideration in that category, a strategic decision that reflected the studio's awareness of the critical consensus that positioned the sequel below the first film's level of overall achievement. At the Annie Awards, the animation industry's own awards ceremony, widely considered the most meaningful peer recognition in the field. Frozen 2 received nominations across multiple technical and creative categories, including production design, character animation and music. The Golden Globe for Best Animated Feature Film was also among the nominations the film received during the 2019-2020 awards season, confirming its status as one of the year's most significant animated productions, even if it did not ultimately take home that particular prize. The film's visual effects and animation teams received recognition from various guilds and professional organisations for their technical achievements, particularly the Nook waterhorse sequences, the particle effects associated with the elemental spirits, and the large-scale environmental simulation of the dam collapse and flood. These technical accolades reflected the genuine industry-wide respect for what the Disney animation team had achieved under significant production pressure and on a compressed timeline. The Kingdom of Arendelle is at peace. Kristoff, Jonathan Groff, is planning a proposal to Anna, Kristen Bell. Snowman Olaf, Josh Gad, is loving life in the sun. And Elsa, Idina Menzel, is content in her role as queen until she hears a mysterious song calling her out into the wilderness. As a rule, animated Disney princess movies don't get theatrical sequels. They end, by definition, with happily ever after. But then, 2013's Frozen went far beyond your average animated Disney princess movie, a $1.2 billion box office behemoth that subverted fairy tale notions of true love with an earworm soundtrack that sent frazzled parents loopy on endless repeat listens. So it is that Frozen's happy ending gives way to a big screen sequel that, as they tend to, goes bigger, bolder and more epic. It begins gloriously with a lush, confident opening act that establishes the new status quo, Elsa, Menzel. In control of her ice powers, ruling Arendelle and living with love and warmth among sister Anna, Belle, soon-to-be brother-in-law Kristoff, Groff, and goofy snowman Olaf, Gad. The first film's frosty palette is swapped for a gorgeous autumnal aesthetic, all golden leaves, hazy sunsets and open fires, bolstered by a string of stirring musical numbers that deal beautifully with ideas of growth and impermanence. I can't freeze this moment, but I can seize this day, sings Elsa. Frozen 2 isn't just set in a season of change, it's about the inevitability of it. It's also a more mature film that deals with notions of maturity for an audience that has itself grown up in the 6 years since the previous outing. That means an expansive, mythical tone as the gang sets off on a quest tied into a mystery around Elsa and Anna's family history, incorporating epic fantasy elements from Middle-earthian stone giants to elemental spirits and indigenous tribal communities. Like Moana before it, Frozen 2 takes Disney further into Studio Ghibli territory, dropping binary good and evil storytelling for more nuanced depictions of the balance between humanity and nature. The monolithic spectre of Let It Go is not only winked at in a sharp gag, but is followed up with a double whammy of Elsa bangers. That the plot largely exists in service of world building leads to a meandering middle act, driven by a mystery that remains narratively vague for too long and is largely obvious in hindsight. If the wider scope is admirable, the mythology extending doesn't always succeed, delivering backstory and familial revelations in hazy, hasty exposition that leaves big questions still unclear come the credits. But just as Frozen transcended a tangled narrative thanks to its engaging characters and show-stopping music, Frozen 2's plot missteps are more than compensated for by another suite of hits by Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez. Olaf, who delivers a hasty recap of the previous adventure in the film's funniest sequence, gets a particularly witty number in When I Am Older, repressing his trauma as he's menaced by forest spirits. Kristoff gets the only notable misfire, a half-hearted parody of mopey soft rock ballads. As for the musical elephant in the room, the monolithic spectre of Let It Go is not only winked at in a sharp gag, but is followed up with a double whammy of Elsa bangers, 2 fresh songs of spine-tingling self-discovery. The propulsive into the unknown and mystical Show Yourself. If neither quite matches the last film's breakout hit, that they both come close is impressive enough. Where Frozen 2 does surpass its predecessor is in the jaw-dropping animation. One moment involving water drawn from a plank of wood is near photoreal. Elsewhere, the film is far more stylish and playful than the prosaic original, with metaphysical, character-driven sequences that make full use of the medium's blank canvas, their imagery more emotionally intuitive than any expository dialogue. A scene of Elsa taming a spectral waterhorse in the heart of a raging sea is simultaneously frightening, beautiful and enigmatic, drawing to mind Rey's finger-clicking journey to self-discovery in Star Wars. The Last Jedi. If the final act underwhelms in the action stakes, Frozen 2 still delivers where it really counts. The emotional beats and relationship between Elsa and Anna, who continually strengthen and uplift each other across the runtime. Among the not inconsiderable flaws, there's enough greatness to make Frozen 2 worth Disney breaking its big rule for, and that in itself is a happy ending. Do you want to build a franchise? Maybe Jennifer Lee and Chris Buck didn't realise this was what they were going to do in creating their sensational Disney animated musical Frozen in 2013, with its lethal Broadway-style show tunes written by Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez and scored by Christopher Beck. It was all about Elsa, the beautiful blonde princess with supernatural icy powers, a story based mostly on Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, along with the still unacknowledged influence of Frozone from The Incredibles. Now it's fiercely anticipated sequel is here. In 2013, parents of young daughters didn't realise how their every waking moment and all of their disposable income was going to be dominated by Frozen, with Elsa toothbrushes, Elsa hairbrushes, Elsa dolls, Elsa backpacks, Elsa snow globes, Elsa onesies, Elsa lunchboxes, Elsa sequin slippers, all to be assembled at Frozen-themed sleepovers. And for all ages, there was the sensational song Let It Go, which hit the nerve centres of adults and children alike with the power of crystal meth. Exiled from her homeland in her magnificent isolation, Elsa realises that she no longer needs to hide her icy superpowers and can use them freely and be herself. She can let it go. All of us, women and men, gay and straight, after a few glasses of wine, can feel the karaoke thrill of that amazing song, which subtextually speaks to grown-up themes. It's Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive for a new generation, building to a defiant voice-cracking melodrama on the famous line. The cold never bothered me anyway. Sadly, there have been numberless vulgar spoof versions on YouTube, including Let One Go, a notorious version in praise of farting. Part of the strangeness of watching Frozen 2 is wondering if there will be a specific sequel to Let It Go, a new number that takes its sentiments forward in some way, and it is simultaneously a mild disappointment and a vague relief that there isn't, or not exactly, although there are some hummable, catchy tunes. It's notable that Elsa, voiced again by Idina Menzel, is still seen fundamentally as a singleton, where it is her devoted sister Anna, voiced again by Kristen Bell, who is the one with the romantic pairing with Kristoff, Jonathan Groff. The sequel takes us some years forward from the end of the first film into the happy ever after, but begins with a flashback to Elsa and Anna's childhood, in which their parents King Agnar, Alfred Molina, and Queen Iduna and Queen Iduna, voiced by Evan Rachel Wood, tell the little girls at bedtime about the enchanted forest that lies to the north, ruled by 4 spirits, symbolised by 4 standing stones: earth, air, fire and water. It is a place with unhappy family associations. Now in the present day, Elsa hears a strange voice calling her from the forest, and she realises that she must journey there to confront and dispel a family secret, naturally with the well-known and well-loved cast of characters by her side. Anna and Kristoff, and also Sven the reindeer and the legendary snowman Olaf, Josh Gad. It's nice to see these figures again. But I couldn't help feeling that there is something a bit underpowered and contrived about the storyline in Frozen 2. A matter of jeopardy synthetically created and artificially resolved, obstacles set in place and then surmounted, characters separated and reunited, bad stuff apparently happening and then unhappening. At times, Frozen 2 almost felt like an extended bonus featurette that could have gone with the Blu-ray edition of the first film. Having said that, it looks and sounds good, with a stirring central song for Elsa entitled Into the Unknown, the curtain raiser for her encounter with the primeval forces of the forest. Olaf, of course, is still a scene stealer, with a great song about how baffled he is by what's going on, entitled When I Am Older. This will all make sense when I am older. Someday I will see that this makes sense. One day when I'm old and wise, I'll look back and realise that these were all completely normal events. He has a very funny scene in which he has to recap the events of the first film in about 10 seconds for people who are not aware of them. There's also an amusing running gag about Kristoff's maladroit attempts at a marriage proposal being misunderstood by Anna. It's an entertaining revival, though a thaw is beginning to set in. Warning. There will be spoilers here in this review, so tread carefully. The little princess inside of me was excited beyond belief. The more cynical adult inside of me, however, was apprehensive. 2019 was definitely Disney's year. There have been 8 major Disney movies in theatres, which doesn't count any from Fox that were released. The year was filled with films ranging from delightfully surprising to sadly forgettable to a little mundane. I wondered which category Frozen 2 was going to be placed in, or if it was going to make its own. This film also had the added pressure of being a sequel, with many people wanting it to live up to the first one. Frozen 2 opens with a flashback to the main characters, Anna, voiced by Kristen Bell, and Elsa, voiced by Idina Menzel, as their father tells them about an enchanted forest that he and his father once visited. It was peaceful and held the powers of the 4 elements: air, water, earth and fire. Their father told the story of how they built a treaty with the people of the forest, but somehow a fight broke out. This angered the enchanted forest, and so it was shrouded in mist. No one has ever gone out, and anyone who ventures to it never returns. Already, this sets the tone to be different than Frozen 2's predecessor, darker and more serious, which makes perfect sense, as the kids who watched the original Frozen have grown up and can probably handle this darker tone. After the flashback, we are returned to present day, where Elsa is concerned with the mysterious voice she keeps hearing. Kristoff, voiced by Jonathan Groff, is trying to propose to Anna, and Olaf, voiced by Josh Gad, is having a midlife crisis. Here, we are greeted with a song, with each of the characters singing about what's going on in their lives. It's a bit of foreshadowing of what each character goes through in the movie. The music really shines in this film, with Elsa's powerful ballad, Into the Unknown, which reminds the cynical adult in me why I fell in love with the original movie in the first place. At the end of the number, however, Elsa awakens the enchanted forest spirits, driving out the citizens of her kingdom to safety. With the need to save their kingdom, Anna, Elsa, Kristoff, and Sven, Kristoff's lovable reindeer, are off to the enchanted forest to set things right. The lore and the story itself are very well told, and the film does an excellent job of answering some of the questions from the first movie, like why their parents went out to sea in the first place and why Elsa has magical powers. We also gained more world building and saw more outside of Arendelle. The animation had a tremendous impact, with the visuals and the different songs working together to create a masterful story. Spoiler warning, last chance each character's journey was also one of my favourite things about the movie. Elsa learned to trust herself with her powers and not blame herself for her parents' death. It turns out they went out to sea to find the answers for her powers. Anna learned that it was okay to let her sister go on her own path, and learned to be brave with a fantastic and emotional solo in the second act. Kristoff was finally able to propose to Anna. Olaf, after briefly dying again, got over his midlife crisis. Finally, the underlying symbolism of the movie was fantastic. How history can change depending on who's telling it, and how it's okay to acknowledge the awful things of one's past. When the Arendelle soldiers first went to the enchanted forest, they built them a dam to help them with their resources. However, it was doing more harm than good, and when one of the members of the forest told the king, Anna and Elsa's grandfather, he killed him. When Anna finds out, she sets out to destroy the dam and make things right. My one complaint about the film is that oftentimes the story felt choppy, and a few of the songs, while great performances, felt very out of place, most notably Olaf's song, When I'm Older, which didn't feel right among the intensity of finding the secrets of the forest. Towards the end, there were a lot of elements that contributed to the backstory of both Anna and Elsa's parents, while also leading Elsa to the answers of the enchanted forest and why it was shrouded in mist. It would have been nice to see more of this backstory, but I understand that the story did not call for it. Elsa, Anna and the gang return for another tale of princess empowerment and earworm soundtrack cuts. When the animated musical Frozen skated into the multiplex in 2013, it grossed a record-breaking $27 billion in cold cash. Let it go? Hell no. 6 years later, Disney delivers an uneven but sensationally entertaining sequel to the Oscar winner that pulls out all the stops. The songs, again by the award-winning couple of Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, are tantalising earworms. The animation bursts with wonders. Wait till you see what the CGI wizards do with water, toughest element to animate. and it's pleasure to reconnect with everyone's favourite sister princesses, Elsa, belted by Idina Menzel, and Anna, trilled by Kristen Bell, along with sassy snowman Olaf, hilarious Josh Gad, lovesick Kristoff, dreamy Jonathan Groff, and Sven, the mostly silent reindeer, as they set off on a new adventure that might get them all killed. Last time, Elsa ran off to a winter fortress because her uncontrollable fingertips could fast freeze anything they touched, including Anna, who coaxed Elsa back without leaning on any dude. Even hunky Prince Hans, Santino Fontana, turned out to be a scheming bastard. It was truly a case of the sisters doing it for themselves. Sweet. This time, Elsa is back on the throne in Arendelle with Anna by her side. But Elsa keeps hearing this haunting melody wafting in from up north. Is it the enchanted forest of Atterhallen, where the indigenous Northuldra tribe holds sway and where Elsa thinks she'll find answers about the source of her own mysterious powers? Of course it is. Flashbacks provide clues through the royal sisters' parents, King Agnar, Alfred Molina, and Queen Iduna, Evan Rachel Wood, and grandfather King Runard, Jeremy Sisto, all of whom may have fallen victim to an icy curse that Elsa means to thaw. She even sings Into the Unknown, a power ballad meant to follow Let It Go to Oscar glory and remind you that the trumpet tonsiled Menzel has a voice that shakes the rafters. For the sisters and their tribe, the road to Atterhallen is filled with perils, especially those huge rocks that turn out to be menacing giants, and watch out for what's under the sea. There are also new characters, including an impressive Sterling K. Brown voicing a soldier trapped in a frozen... Well, it's best we stop there in the name of no spoilers. Just know that Elsa must fight through a ghostly shadow world before she reaches the light. It didn't seem like a wise idea to ask any of the children at my recent screening of Disney's Frozen 2, out November 22, what they thought of it. So instead, I'll just assume that the many giddy shrieks and laughs heard throughout suggest that the little ones for whom this movie, a sequel to the 2013 mega hit that revived the moribund Disney princess genre and created an earworm for the ages in the power ballad Let It Go, was made, liked it quite a good deal. Sure, there were a few errant cries for more popcorn rather than more Elsa, and yes, some of the weest folk had to be carried out by their parents back into the relative brightness and thus safety of the theatre lobby. But for the most part, the kids seemed to think Frozen 2 was pretty great, pretty exciting, pretty funny, pretty transporting. Take their word for it, I suppose. Because from my sorry adult view, this sequel is entirely unnecessary, except in its duty to serve the needs of capital. Unnecessary isn't always a bad thing. Plenty of fun or otherwise enriching stuff doesn't need to exist. But a dire case of cynical sequelitis plagues Frozen 2. The directors, Jennifer Lee and Chris Buck, and writers, Lee and Alison Schroeder, grasp for a new mythos to match the originals, but come up woefully short. In that striving to justify a sequel, the Frozen team is forced to go bigger, grander, more existential, while still keeping things accessible to children. That's a really tough balancing act, one Frozen 2 can't manage. While I admire the movie's attempt to more deeply mine the identities of sister princesses Anna, sweet, non-magical, and Elsa, restless, can control snow and ice, its discoveries are rushed and are served up half-baked. As Ralph Breaks, the internet proved quite winningly this time, last year, a children's film about one half of a lovable duo leaving the comfort of home to explore the world beyond is a pretty poignant story device. Frozen 2 begins promisingly in that same vein. Following the first film's adventure, Anna is content in her Nordic kingdom of Arendelle, hanging out with her sister, her dopey hunk boyfriend Kristoff, and her magical snowman friend Olaf. Elsa, on the other hand, is feeling an itch. She's being called to by a faraway song only she can hear. She suspects that in following that voice, maybe it's hers? She may discover where she, so othered by her unique magic abilities, really belongs. That's the journey of the movie. one towards further growth and self-actualization that will have the many fan theorists out there who've pegged Elsa as a maybe queer icon just that much more convinced. For a brief second during the movie, I thought Disney might actually confirm, or at least overtly hint at, that supposition in the film. But no, Anna's boring old straight relationship is the only real romance we get. Along the way, Frozen 2 issues vague, if important, messages about conservation and environmentalism, about respecting Indigenous peoples and cultures, and about how growing up is both scary and exciting, urging that realising nothing is permanent in this or any world should be an encouragement to embrace the more intangibly lasting things, like love. That's all nice stuff. And I'm sure some of it will burrow into various kids' brains and become some tiny but crucial part of their worldview. So I'm not trying to rain snow on that lesson learning parade. From a purely aesthetic point, though Frozen 2 imparts those themes less than inspiringly, the film's plotting relies on quick realizations and easy fixes. That's not exactly rare in children's entertainment, but there's little effort to even half disguise Frozen 2's plot developments as organic. The movie hits each beat of its outline without any time or room allowed for a sense of true atmosphere or occasion or revelation to sink in. The film is a lot of hurrying to get to what the conglomerate overlords surely care most about, achieving a let-it-go-esque moment of pop ballad triumph, a true clarion call of marketability. Frozen 2 is really hungry for a sellable anthem. In that vain pursuit, the movie throws not one, not two, but three would-be barn burners at the audience. The songs are by the original, Oscar-winning Frozen tunesmiths, Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, so one might assume, if one is perhaps Bob Iger, that at least one of these sweaty songs is bound to recapture the old magic. They all sound fine and are sung with the usual bombast by Idina Menzel as Elsa, and, finally getting a belter, Kristen Bell as Anna. And yet, not a half hour after seeing the movie, I couldn't call up a single melody. So that's all something of a wash. But Frozen 2's weirdest, and maybe worst, sin is how routinely unpleasant it is to look at. The animation is oddly bland and inert. Street scenes in Arendelle look distressingly, depressingly empty and devoid of life. When the sisters and their cohort travel north to explore the movie's mystery, there are some bursts of fantastical visual grace. They're fleeting though, and otherwise Frozen 2 gives off the same lacklustre dimness that hand-drawn direct-to-video sequels like Return of Jafar and Beauty and the Beast. The Enchanted Christmas did back in their humbler day. There's a patness to this theatrical release sequel's design that looks sorta cheap, even though I'm sure this movie cost quite a lot of money to make. Again, what Frozen 2 is trying to say directly to kids has definite value. And there is sweetness to be found throughout, especially in the way the movie articulates how understanding oneself is a constant process. The first film's Happily Ever After only got these sisters so far, it turns out. But the project surrounding those sentiments has a wheezy, floundering inelegance. Plenty of children will find it special, I'm sure, and maybe that's all that matters. From my cold-hearted grown-up perspective though, Frozen 2 pushes itself out on its own ice floe, and it's all too easy to, well, let it go. Back in 2013, Walt Disney Pictures celebrated their 53rd animated feature film with the release of Frozen. Directed by Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee, the film, which starred the voice talents of Kristen Bell, Idina Menzel, Jonathan Groff and Josh Gad, tells the story of a fearless princess, Anna, who sets off on a quest alongside seasoned iceman, Kristoff, his loyal reindeer, Sven, and a magical yet naive snowman, Olaf, to save her estranged sister, Elsa, whose uncontrollable icy powers have inadvertently trapped their home, the kingdom of Arendelle, in an eternal winter. Taking inspiration from Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Snow Queen, Frozen was met with universal acclaim from both critics and moviegoers everywhere, with most praising the feature for its visuals, screenplay, themes, music and voice acting. Additionally, Some viewers considered Frozen to be one of the best Disney animated feature since the studio's Renaissance era, 1989-1999. Along with its critical success, Frozen went on to become a commercial success as well, with the movie grossing $1.276 billion worldwide box office. At the awards season, Frozen even went to win several key awards, including 2 Academy Awards for Best Animated Feature and Best Original Song, Let It Go, AC, the Golden Globe Award for Best Animated Feature Film, the BAFTA Award for Best Animated Film, 2 Grammy Awards for Best Compilation, Soundtrack for Visual Media and Best Song Written for Visual Media. Let It Go, and several others. Now, 6 years have passed since the release of Frozen, and Walt Disney Pictures and director Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee finally return to the Kingdom of Arendelle with the highly anticipated sequel Frozen 2. Does this long-awaited follow-up adventure deliver on the special magic that the first movie was able to conjure up, or does the feature's enchantment get lost within its own ambition and storytelling? The story after the events of the first film, peace has found its way into the Kingdom of Arendelle, with Queen Elsa, Idina Menzel, her feisty sister Anna, Kristen Bell ruling in harmony, with fellow friend Kristoff, Jonathan Groff, trying to work up the nerve to propose to Anna, leaning heavily on his reindeer companion Sven for support. However, while all seems peaceful, Elsa is soon pulled into a different direction, drawn to a spiritual voice that inspires urgency to the great enchanted forest, a realm that plays home to mystical forces, including an enigmatic civilization Anna and Elsa's father, King Agnar, Alfred Molina, once shared the details about with his children when they were little. When this elemental power pushes the people of Arendelle out of their homes and out of the kingdom itself, Elsa sets out to uncover more about the death of her parents, hoping to find the source of her magic. Unwilling to let her sibling embark on a solo mission, Anna tries to keep up with the Ice Queen, joined by Kristoff, Sven and Olaf, Josh Gad, as they confront the secrets of the Northuldra's tribe and the power that the enchanted forest holds. The good, the bad, oh yes. Frozen, I remember when this movie original came out back in 2013. Of course, being a fan of animated movies, especially Disney's animated features, I was very interested in seeing Frozen as the film's marketing campaigns, for it looked fantastic and definitely eye-catching, of trying to be somewhat reminiscent the Disney Renaissance era of animated motion pictures. So when I actually saw it on its opening night, I was too right about this movie, in a good way. Frozen felt like warm nostalgia of classic Disney animated features, embracing its signature identity of singing princesses, talking animated sidekicks, and tales of true love that helped push the story of Anna and Elsa to soaring new heights of quality children's animated entertainment. Of course, I loved Let It Go, which I do agree got overplayed after the film's release, but is still such a great Disney song. I even put it as 5 of my top 10 best Disney songs list. Additionally, I even said back then that Frozen was going to be a big hit with everyone, and it surely did, with the everything from box office sales to toy products merchandise to its soundtrack, both physical and digital formats. The whole Frozen brand becoming a juggernaut and profitable force in Disney's sales. All in all, Frozen was tremendous entertaining animated film by Disney and, at least to me, deserve all the praise it has received. This brings me back to the point of talking and reviewing Frozen 2, Disney's follow-up sequel film to 2013's Frozen. Naturally, given how much I loved and enjoyed the first film, you can tell that I was curious to see if Disney was going to do a sequel and when the feature would materialise. Of course, with Disney being Disney, trying to build a franchise tag with a lot of their properties, that very idea materialised a few years later when they made that announcement that Frozen 2 would happen and be released in 2019. You can tell I was quite excited to see this sequel and to see where this new animated adventure would go and how it will all shaped up to be a successful sequel or a disappointing flop. As to be expected, the movie was highly promoted throughout most of the 2019 year, with the film's marketing campaign, i.e. movie trailer, TV spots, products, merch, etc., capitalising on the much anticipation of the film's release. Plus, I was interested to see much the movie would differ from the first movie, with Frozen 2 promising to be more complex and even darker than its predecessor. So, I went to see Frozen 2 on its opening night, expecting great things from this long-awaited sequel. What did I think of it? Well, despite a few messy areas within its narrative, Frozen 2 is a solid, yet confusing, sequel that delivers on being an entertaining animated endeavour with its impressive animation and talented voice talents. It doesn't overtake the first Frozen, but it has a deeper and more mature story to tell. Returning to the director's chair are both Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee, the same dynamic duo behind the first Frozen movie. Thus, as one would expect, the creative minds behind the uber-popular first endeavour seems likely a perfectly choice in helming a sequel feature by trying to capture the same Disney magic with Frozen 2. In this regard, the movie succeeds and delivers a very engaging sequel instalment that feels very much in line for both a Disney animated movie as well as being follow-up adventure to the first feature. Buck and Lee know this world, i.e. the kingdom of Arendelle and the people therein. So the idea of the duo returning to the project is a harmonious one that works and will surely delight fans out there. Indeed, the cards are certainly stacked against Buck and Lee with the first film, which was more or less intended to be a standalone animated feature. So, what Buck and Lee are able to create present in Frozen 2 is something quite interesting and unique, framing the sequel with a more sophisticated and deeper narrative plot for the movie's characters to explore. In addition, the film offers up new material for Frozen 2 to explore, expanding the world with new lore and mythology, i.e. the elemental spurts of enchanted forest, which are quite intriguing, as well as expanding upon the mystery behind Anna and Elsa's parents. Buck and Lee seize this opportunity in Frozen 2 and stage the film's events in a deeper and sometimes darker tale than the first movie, which certainly does add more emotional impact in Frozen 2. This is also due to the film's script, which was also penned by Buck and Lee, as well as Mark Smith, Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, which allows the Frozen characters to evolve a bit more and share experience, another dramatic adventure that delves into different facets of personal journey, especially in Anna and Elsa's sisterly path. All in all, while there are some of the mechanics that aren't completely ironed out, more on that below, Frozen 2 still delivers a fascinating narrative with an entertaining and emotional sequel that certainly proves worthy of its original 2013 film, where one of the areas that Frozen 2 undisputedly shines is in its presentation, which is absolutely gorgeous to see. The first Frozen movie was indeed quite beautiful and stunningly detailed, that really was the top-notch animated feature of 2013. Likewise, Frozen Sugan's animation is highly impressive and certainly pushes the boundaries of animation, making the movie's characters and backdrop settings even richer and more detailed look and feel to this Frozen world. There's just something about the movie's animation looks incredible and certainly takes animated movie styles to a new level, i.e. more realistic looking and fluid than the previous Frozen. Additionally, the cinematography for the film of which Buck and Lee present is also exquisite, offering up some sublimely slick and cinematic sequences that are sprinkled throughout the movie in dazzling and spectacle way. Lastly, the film's score, which was composed by Christopher Beck, is great and definitely hits all the right melodic notes from start to finish. Of course, being a Disney movie, Frozen 2 continues its predecessor's trend to feature a selection of musical songs that its characters sing, helping to elevate both the story's emotional beats as well as continuing to embrace Disney's signature identity. Reflecting the film's deeper story and dramatic moments, The songs utilised in the movie are thematically charged and have a more grow-up feel of dealing with issues that the characters expressive in the film. Of course, this is thanks to the script harmonising with the movie, but also with the original writing duo of Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, giving Frozen 2 some emotional strong songs like Into the Unknown, The Next Right Thing and Lost in the Woods. This sequence is amusing as it's presented almost like a music video. The only downside is that none of the Frozen 2 songs quite surpass any of the songs from the first film. Not even Into the Unknown, which can be considered the equivalent to Frozen's Let It Go, can outshine that extremely popular breakout song. Then again, Let It Go is one of the songs that really hard to trump and outdo. Unfortunately, there are a few pieces in the movie that hold Frozen 2 back from surpassing the original film. For starters, the film, while ambitious and expansive, seems like it bites off more than it can chew and doesn't know how to present parts of its narrative. Much like Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, Disney's other fairy tale sequel. Frozen 2 expands upon the original movie by adding new lore and mythology into the mix, making the movie's world and its story larger in comparison to the original film. While what's presented is indeed interesting and intriguing, the movie, or rather the film's script handling, gets muddled into its execution and how it circumnavigates its own story. There's a lot to say in Frozen Sue's story, with plenty of ideas, concepts and characters, both old and new. But how the movie and its script plays it out is a little bit mismanaged, and how it wants to spell out its own story. This includes some parts of the narrative which are presented vaguely and could have been easily expanded upon rather than thinly sketched. Then there's also the conflict of the enchanted forest, a huge centrepiece of Frozen 2. Again, it's definitely interesting and wondrous to behold, but it just feels like the movie never fully explains parts of it, especially within the various elemental spirits that dwell. There are also a few continuity issues that I felt were a bit perplexing, especially those surrounding Anna and Elsa's parents, King Agnar and Queen Iduna. I'm not saying that the movie is terrible or bad, but the narrative, despite more complex and more sophisticated, seems like it could be more refined in certain areas in order to deliver a through story within its wholesome presentation. Generally speaking, despite having a solid presentation, Frozen 2 just simply outbeat nor outmatched the likability of the first Frozen movie. There's also a similarity between Frozen 2 and to Avatar. The Last Airbender, not so much that horrible live-action movie, but more of the popular cartoon series. I can't say much on the similarities without spoiling the film, but fans of the Avatar. The Last Airbender will clearly see the sometimes mirror reflection found in Frozen 2, which kind can be both a blessing for some and curse for others in film criticism. To me, I somewhere in between as I liked it, but was a bit disappointed that Frozen 2 didn't go further with some of the material. What helps overlook some of these criticism remarks is in the voice talents for Frozen 2, with many of the core talents from the first feature returning to reprise their Frozen character roles once again. Of course, leading the charge in the movie are actresses Kristen Bell and Idina Menzel, who plays Frozen Second's main princess protagonist characters of Princess Anna and Queen Elsa of Arendelle. Bell, known for her roles in Veronica Mars, House of Lies and Forgetting Sarah Marshall, is still heartwarming as Anna, the livelier and more energetic of the two sister princesses. Like before, Belle's enthusiastic voice lends some spunkiness to the character, but Frozen 2 gives the character of Anna more room to grow as she concerns herself over Elsa's well-being and how she must do the right thing, offering plenty of character growth and maturity for her. Likewise, Menzel, known for her roles in Enchanted, Rent and Glee, delivers another emotionally stirring performance as Elsa, who is once again placed at the heart of the feature. Like before, Elsa takes centre stage for the movie definitely adds another layer to the Snow Queen character archetype, almost like a tragedy, if you think about. Collectively, Menzel is pitch perfect, no pun intended, as Elsa, and hits all the right notes and moments with the character, making her once again memorable throughout. Plus, I always love when Menzel really belts it out in her songs, especially in Into the Unknown and in Show Yourself. As a side note, Elsa does get a new look in Frozen 2 and I love it. In more secondary roles, the characters of Kristoff and Olaf return and complement the feature's main protagonist characters of Anna and Elsa, with actors Jonathan Groff and Josh Gad returning to their post respectfully. Goff, known for his roles in Looking, Glee and Boss, certainly has a certain charm in making Kristoff a likeable character, with Frozen 2's story giving him more of a mature plot thread of trying to work up the courage to ask Anna for his hand in marriage. Some might argue that it's a bit cliché of sorts, but Kristoff, as a character, deals with the emotional stress and nervousness of the situation. Again, adding more maturity into the plot, with Goff showcasing plenty of charisma and sincerity into his vocal performance. Plus, his rendition of Lost in the Woods is great. Similarly, Gad, known for his roles in The Wedding Ringer, Pixels and Beauty and the Beast, is once again a true crowd pleaser in the movie, with the character of Olaf getting the most laughs and comedic spotlight moments throughout Frozen 2. Gad hits all the right timing moments with Olaf, and the character is hilarious in his more mature, yet still inherently goofy, persona in the movie. Indeed, some viewers out there think that the character of Olaf, and Gad himself, is a bit overrated, but Gad certainly knows the character and makes it his own, and plays more of a pivotal part in Frozen 2's narrative. Additionally, actor Ciarán Hinds, Game of Thrones and Rome, returns to reprise his role as Grand Pabby, the leader of the trolls that raised Kristoff from youth. New characters are introduced in Frozen 2, and while the voice talents behind them are fine, I felt that the movie could have easily and should expanded upon these roles with a bit of greater emphasis on their involvement on the film's story than what was given. Perhaps the character that makes the most memorable impression is in the character Lieutenant Destin Matthias, one of the leaders of a group of Arendelle soldiers that are trapped within the enchanted forest, voiced by Sterling K. Brown. This Is Us and The Predator. The character isn't quite as well-rounded and having depth beyond his initial introduction, but Sterling's voice makes the character memorable, at least to me. In more smaller roles, actor Alfred Molina, Spider-Man 2 and The Da Vinci Code, actress Evan Rachel Wood, Westworld and Across the Universe, and actor Jeremy Sisto, Clueless and Wrong Turn, as Anna and Elsa's parents, King Agnar and Queen Iduna, and their grandfather, King Runenard. While their screen time is limited, kind of expected it, these voice talents are perfectly fine for the movie, with Molina, Wood and Sisto lending seasoned gravitas to these supporting roles. The rest of the new cast, including actress Martha Plimpton, Parenthood and the Goonies as Yelana, the leader of the North Uldra tribe, actress Rachel Matthews, Happy Death Day and Looking for Alaska as Honeymaran, a member of the North Uldra tribe, and actor Jason Ritter, Parenthood and Gravity Falls, as Ryder, a member of the North Uldra who is Honeymaran's brother and shares Kristoff's love of reindeer, are woefully underdeveloped in the movie. Of course, their acting talents in providing the voices for these respective characters are perfectly fine, but the movie just never allows these characters to be fully developed beyond their initial setup, which is disappointing, as these particular characters could have been easily expanded upon and had more to do in the film. Alas, they weren't, which is sad. Final thoughts: get ready to let go of the past and answer the call as Anna, Elsa, Kristoff, Sven and Olaf go beyond the kingdom of Arendelle to uncover the truth in the movie Frozen 2. Director Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee's follow-up sequel certainly does need proof to be a solid sequel endeavour that goes deeper and sometimes darker, storytelling for our favourite Frozen characters, and certainly expanding the film's world with new lore and mythology to entice the story in this second adventure. While the movie does struggle in how it's present some of the new elements, never truly surpassing the original Frozen, and misses a few opportunities along the way, the rest of the feature is a wonderful sequel endeavour which is complemented by the film's impressive animation, mature character threads, solid voice talents and just an entertaining sequel that works. To me, I like this movie. Yes, this movie can't beat out the original Frozen, but it is still a wholesome endeavour that delivers a fine follow-up adventure. Thus, my recommendation for this is a favourable reprimanded, as I'm sure that most fans of the first movie, as well as young viewers out there, will eagerly want to see this movie and will be delighted with this second Frozen adventure. Will there be a Frozen 3? Well, that answer is still uncertain, but I would certainly welcome the idea, as I'm sure many fans out there will agree. In the end, whether or not the next chapter is to be written, Frozen 2 is fine, yet slightly imperfect sequel endeavour, showcasing that the House of Mouse still has some of its signature magic left to conjure within its animated feature films. Do you want to build a franchise? Maybe Jennifer Lee and Chris Buck didn't realise this was what they were going to do in creating their sensational Disney animated musical Frozen in 2013, with its lethal Broadway-style show tunes written by Kristen Anderson-Lopez and Robert Lopez and scored by Christopher Beck. It was all about Elsa, the beautiful blonde princess with supernatural icy powers, a story based mostly on Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, along with the still unacknowledged influence of Frozone from The Incredibles. Now its fiercely anticipated sequel is here. In 2013, parents of young daughters didn't realise how their every waking moment and all of their disposable income was going to be dominated by Frozen, with Elsa toothbrushes, Elsa hairbrushes, Elsa dolls, Elsa backpacks, Elsa snow globes, Elsa onesies, Elsa lunchboxes, Elsa sequin slippers, all to be assembled at Frozen-themed sleepovers. And for all ages, there was the sensational song, Let It Go, which hit the nerve centres of adults and children alike with the power of crystal meth. Exiled from her homeland in her magnificent isolation, Elsa realises that she no longer needs to hide her icy superpowers and can use them freely and be herself. She can let it go. All of us, women and men, gay and straight, after a few glasses of wine can feel the karaoke thrill of that amazing song, which subtextually speaks to grown-up themes. It's Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive for a new generation, building to a defiant voice-cracking melodrama on the famous line. The cold never bothered me anyway. Sadly, there have been numberless vulgar spoof versions on YouTube, including Let One Go, a notorious version in praise of farting. Part of the strangeness of watching Frozen 2 is wondering if there will be a specific sequel to Let It Go, a new number that takes its sentiments forward in some way, and it is simultaneously a mild disappointment and a vague relief that there isn't, or not exactly, although there are some hummable, catchy tunes. It's notable that Elsa, voiced again by Idina Menzel, is still seen fundamentally as a singleton, where it is her devoted sister Anna, voiced again by Kristen Bell, who is the one with the romantic pairing with Kristoff, Jonathan Groff. The sequel takes us some years forward from the end of the first film into the happy ever after, but begins with a flashback to Elsa and Anna's childhood, in which their parents, King Agnar, Alfred Molina, and Queen Iduna, voiced by Evan Rachel Wood, tell the little girls at bedtime about the enchanted forest that lies to the north, ruled by 4 spirits, symbolised by 4 standing stones: earth, air, fire and water. It is a place with unhappy family associations. Now in the present day, Elsa hears a strange voice calling her from the forest, and she realises that she must journey there to confront and dispel a family secret, naturally with the well-known and well-loved cast of characters by her side. Anna and Kristoff, and also Sven the reindeer, and the legendary snowman Olaf, Josh Gad. It's nice to see these figures again, but I couldn't help feeling that there is something a bit underpowered and contrived about the storyline in Frozen 2. a matter of jeopardy synthetically created and artificially resolved. Obstacles set in place and then surmounted, characters separated and reunited, bad stuff apparently happening and then unhappening. At times, Frozen 2 almost felt like an extended bonus featurette that could have gone with the Blu-ray edition of the first film. Having said that, it looks and sounds good, with a stirring central song for Elsa entitled Into the Unknown, the Curtain Raiser, for her encounter with the primeval forces of the forest. Olaf, of course, is still a scene stealer, with a great song about how baffled he is by what's going on, entitled When I Am Older. This will all make sense. When I am older, someday I will see that this makes sense. One day when I'm old and wise, I'll look back and realise that these were all completely normal events. He has a very funny scene in which he has to recap the events of the first film in about 10 seconds for people who are not aware of them. There's also an amusing running gag about Kristoff's maladroit attempts at a marriage proposal being misunderstood by Anna. It's an entertaining revival, though a thaw is beginning to set in.